quick while we've got no public here. Now, who's that wearing that strange scarf down there? Oh, Councillor Casson. Oh. Okay, councillors, we're going to start on item 8, draft Hamilton Special Housing Area Policy, and then move to item 16, Te Rapa North Growth Cell. Keep the two growth-related issues together. Richard's going to stand up and give a speech from the throne over there.
I'm not going to give a speech. Councillors, you would have received, when you arrived this morning, an updated policy. The only substantive change for that policy is item 13 under purpose, and that's highlighted in track changes, and that's just to reflect if there's ever a issue between...
So the page 2 of 10 in the yellow fronted sheet there, Gary.
Item 13,
top.
The purpose, the item in red highlight is this basically saying if there's ever a conflict between the policy and the Act, it's just common sense, but we wanted to state it that the Act prevails, and so that's only substantive change. The other change is the staff recommendation. I have put some thought to it, and we originally suggested in the report we would do targeted consultation. Given the level of interest that I've received from various quarters in terms of this policy, I think we'll do full consultation for 3 weeks. And so there's an updated staff recommended resolution. However, of course, you're at liberty to put whatever recommendation forward you wish. Thank you. And Calvin, over to you.
And councillors, I've asked for time reasons this afternoon for all the reports to be taken as read and move straight to questions, unless there's anything really dramatically new, like Richard explaining that change to the paper we've got here. So we're going to take questions on this paper here is what we're going to be referring to during this discussion. So, sorry, I'll look at the list. I've got Mayor Andrew first. Andrew's going to move it. That's the recommendations in here, which are on page, let me get that.
Behind you, Dave.
Oh, have we not got them in here?
On the board behind you.
Yeah, I know that.
No, that's slightly different from the staff recommendation.
Okay, so hang on. Here. I'm not looking in there, I'm looking in here. What's in here?
Yep, so, sorry, Mr Chair, I have been receiving some feedback. Originally we intended doing targeted consultation.
Yeah, no, I heard that.
And so the recommendation...
Trying to find where it is.
So it was in there on page... excuse me.
Yeah.
On page 29, item 17, just under item 17.
Yeah.
I'm now recommending that, given the level of interest, or the broad level of interest, I believe it's more pertinent to do just regular consultation, have hearings, and then bring back a final policy post the submissions and hearings.
So all that's happened is the word targeted has been removed.
And I've shortened it to 3 weeks, which is probably the tightest I believe we can do, and still do a good process.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's the recommendation. It's been moved by Mayor Andrew. Is the seconder to get on the table? Councillor James got in first. Sorry, Paula. He's much quicker on the draw than you. No, we've got... Oh, Gary, you are next anyway.
Sorry, anyway, so... we've now got a motion on... I was going to do some questions as well.
Absolutely happy to take questions. It's just on the table for us.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So you know which resolution you're referring to.
Thank you.
So, Gary, you go.
Okay. Okay, just background, page 37, paragraph 1 and then paragraph 6, and it's about what Richard just said then about priorities, or who's got the best, which is the highest protocol. Okay, the talks about adequate infrastructure, so 6 partially offered district plan as consideration. And then number 1 talks about recognises housing affordability and social economic issues will impact community wellbeing. What happens when our partially operative district plan drives up the price of housing?
Luke?
I'm not aware of any evidence to that, pointing to that.
So the whole rationale...
hypothetical question Gary's asking, if maybe...
well, the whole rationale for the special housing accords is there's not sufficient land available for houses.
No.
And that's by definition. Secondly, not having enough land is increasing the existing value of land and putting up the prices. So there is a conflict there, and I just want to figure out how do we
Could I answer?
resolve that conflict?
I think basically and you asked the question at the council meeting, I think, about, I'm not sure which meeting it was, about whether or not the housing...
Most of them, I think.
Thank you. Whether or not the
I'm
housing...
consistent.
Thank you. Whether or not the housing accord was created as a response to a weakness in our district plan. It's not. Things have moved on. What the government has said as a priority is affordable... Well, actually, they've set now, effectively, even though it's called the affordable... It is about affordable housing, they've set that an oversupply of housing, which will ultimately drive down the price, is what their priority is. So this whole policy is about giving priority to rezoning land for the purposes of increased housing stock. So the fact that this is here in front of you today sort of answers your question.
Pardon?
The fact that this is here today sort of answers your question, that there are potential areas within our currently zoned land that from a pocket-by-pocket basis could be rezoned for a high level of intensification from a residential point of view.
Okay, thank you. Point 2 on the same page, housing affordability is affected by, I mean, it should possibly say a number of factors, including da-da-da. Okay, because that assumes that that's, you know, that means...
Is that an amendment you'd like to see made?
Yeah, it would be, yeah. Because this is our policy. So all of my questions about the policy, the report's not quite so much. Okay, going across to page 38, principle 14, principles, which is 14G, just raises a question where council strategic infrastructure networks are unavailable to a special housing area. In that situation, the means area, not accord, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
For any reason, but not included to blah, blah, blah. All necessary infrastructure will be provided and funded by the development at no cost to council. Does that at all conflict with our development levies policy?
No,
I understand this is a high-level thing, but...
So the principle is consistent with our growth funding policy. So that growth funding policy enables land to be brought on for urban development. If it is not funded or it's not planned to be funded in terms of LTP, that's fine. We can facilitate that so long as that the person who's wanting to bring that land to urbanisation is prepared to pay for the infrastructure. So the principle is consistent with the existing policy. Okay,
so that principle could conceivably raise the development levies for someone doing work within an SHA. Means someone doing an SHA could be paying higher development levies that someone doing an exactly similar development in a non-SHA thing, because there is some distribution of the costs of growth back to existing ratepayers, because there's a perception, well, because there's a reality that existing ratepayers do gain some benefit. So is that right?
So the principle there is, for just so all councillors understand, is if someone's looking under this policy to bring on land for housing in an area where there are issues around infrastructure servicing or funding, they can do it so long as they're prepared to pay for it, and that's an important principle. So they get the opportunity of bringing something outside of the current planning framework we've got into a real opportunity to be developed for residential purposes. If it's not funded in terms of infrastructure, then we're saying they should be paying for that infrastructure.
So just to be clear, that developer would know from this policy and will find out through experience that he or she will be expected to pay a little more than would have happened if it was already in our development plans.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I and J just conflict a little bit. You're trading off high quality urban designs and as critical as practicable. How do we resolve that conflict?
Well, first of all, my observation would be that they're not mutually exclusive. So one is the whole intent of the SHA legislation, or the HASHA legislation, I should say, is to create opportunities that can be brought to market very quickly. And the reason it preferences things moving fast is that the actual legislation itself is set to be repealed in 2022. So when it was first come into play, it was only meant to be for 3 years to take advantage of opportunities that were commercially real. Secondly, the question around design quality is specifically referenced in the HASHA Act itself. It's the only piece of legislation that actually references the New Zealand Urban Design Protocol. So what the legislation intends is that you can bring housing to market faster than normal RMA processes, but not at the expense of a good design quality outcome. And so that's why those are solid principles that we're looking to include in the policy itself.
So which one takes precedent over the other? So, for example, and this is an example that may not be appropriate, but people back in the old days, people used to try and do apartments, and they do them without a balcony. All the people who didn't have any skin in the game said, no, you've got to put balconies on because they make us feel pretty. Who would win in that?
It's not about preferencing either one of those principles over any other. These are a set of principles that apply in totality. When we get into actually evaluating an expression of interest, there's a specific reference about design quality there. It's just something that we would need to assess at the time of the EOI coming in, and that's something that we would report back to you, because ultimately only this council can make a recommendation to the minister to proceed or not.
Also, Lachlan, my understanding is that there's some evaluation criteria of which design quality is the lowest ranked consideration.
That's right. So there is in the Act.
So, sorry, so does that mean that, and that was my point really, Luke, that one of those has to be above the other one. Otherwise, you're just going to smash in the middle, aren't you? So I think Richard said that in actual fact, I beg your pardon, J is a little lower than I.
So when you're dealing with a qualifying development, so once an SHA has been declared and someone comes in for a resource consent to get an approval under that SHA, design quality is at the lower end, right? But in terms of the policy, in terms of the principles, all these principles hold and inform our evaluation for you to even recommend to the minister whether or not something should be an SHA area. So yes, we want to know about it now, but in terms of the preference when it comes to a resource consent, the design quality issues are something that need to be factored in, but they come at the bottom of the list.
So, Councillor, it might help you to... Over here.
Yeah. Where's that voice coming from?
It's a tag team. They've got 3 staff members on here, Gary.
Watch out.
There.
So the principles are really, does the application fit these principles in general? Yes or no? I think what you're looking for in terms of the weighting about how they apply is then in the criteria and the pieces beyond that in the schedules, not in the principles. So clearly the idea, you run through this, does it make the majority of those principles? Yes, it does. Now let's look at it in detail in the criteria, which is in the schedules to the back.
Well, because...
That's where the weighting comes in that you're after.
Because we've already been told from Richard that the legislation trumps our policy anyway, can we alter it such that it's quite clear that getting it done quickly will be superior to getting it meeting some arbitrary urban design policies?
Well, it does. That's what the intent of the Act is. So, and as the amended piece that we're throwing out adds that line in there specifically for that purpose.
Does it?
Yes, it does. That's the point on point 13 on page 2 for your reading pleasure. It says the addition is, for the avoidance of doubt, the policy shall inform the application of the Act. In the event of any conflict between the policy, the PODP and the Act shall prevail.
Okay, so can we put that into our principles then? Can we actually put that?
It's in the policy.
It's not, okay. Yeah, I've got this bit of paper and I can see what it says on 13, but then there's a conflict. So we've got a principle up here, or a purpose. We go into principles and the principles haven't been amended for what is in there.
It's not a conflict. The principles I think that Calvin was trying to explain is basically the principles by which we will establish the policy. The application of the policy and the criteria is set without that. There's throughout the document. And if you look at A9, for example, about design quality, which is basically when we're getting into the evaluating criteria.
Sorry, I didn't get your reference. What was it?
Page 42, or in that version, or page 6 of the policy, item A9.
Oh, yeah.
Design quality. The word there is have regard, which is the word used in the legislation. So quality will be a consideration. It doesn't say it's a mandatory requirement.
Okay.
So when you're working through the framework, the policy rules, the Act rules supreme. But as you apply this, we need to consider it all. So when we bring it back, the way the policy is designed, we will bring it back initially for you unvetted, effectively is how it's going to work. Then you will pick the horses you want to back. We'll then go up and consider them against the more detailed criteria, then bring it back again once we've considered all of that information. And then we'll, at that point, we'll tell you the ones that actually rank up against the legislation, the ones that don't, what you need to consider and what you don't as well.
Okay, I guess my scepticism comes from the debates that Luke and I have enjoyed across the last term about urban design panels and who has precedent and whether they have yay or nay ability and an inability to get a straight question, a straight answer, and also was reignited.
Gary, questions, please.
Was also reignited when Thomas Gibbons, one of the speakers at our public forum, also raised
Gary,
issues.
questions, please.
So don't you think that when Thomas Gibbons from the Property Committee, or for the last 3 years I've been having battles with Luke about the primacy of each of these things, that I'm okay to be sceptical, and I should be asking this because I want this thing to bloody well work, and I don't want it to fall over.
Gary,
and I don't. So am I right to be asking?
Gary, please stop for a sec. Direct your question to a staff member by all means. Please don't make speeches. I said that at the start of the day. It's not targeting you, it's targeting everyone.
So I have asked a question,
Who are you
and
asking?
I'm just trying to get some clarity
Who
on
are you
the question.
Who are you asking? Who are you
I was
asking?
asking Luke,
Okay.
and which has primacy.
Yeah, because, and this, sorry, Gary, just wait for a second. This is something I want to ask staff, that we only have one staff member answer people's questions rather than 3 different ones, because that's prolonging it as well. Sorry, back to you, Gary.
Okay. So I actually genuinely want this thing to work, because I think a district plan is as you know. Just going down to intended policy outcomes. 15, D. And this is a complete and utter...
Gary, sorry.
I'm asking, okay, is this a complete and utter contradiction? Ensure that these special housing...
Gary, page please when you're making a reference.
Oh, sorry. It's paragraph 15,
Of
D, page 38.
Thank you.
Now, there's something to me, there seems to be something wrong with D, because it's a complete and utter contradiction. The whole reason we're doing the SHAs is because there is, and it's already been determined that our district plan doesn't cut the mustard, using your colloquialism there, Dave. So so it says ensure that the SHAs are generally consistent with and have regard to the relevant provisions of the what's the first P stand for? Provisional operational district plan. The whole rationale for the SHAs is that the district plan was, for want of a better word, not working. So how can the SHA be consistent with the thing that it's supposed to fix?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, the reason why D is in there is that in the accord that the council agreed to earlier in the year, in that accord, there's a provision in there that talks about for the purpose of clarifying any special housing areas, if they're in non-residential areas, you have to go back to the relevant parts of the operative district plan to pick the most appropriate residential provisions to apply to that site. So, for example, if we had an SAH application that we liked and we thought was a good one in an industrial area, you can't assess any future residential development against the industrial provisions because it's an industrial area. So the SHA, an applicant would say, in this instance, we want to be a residential site and we're going to use the medium density provisions of the partly operative district plan on the basis by which we want council to consider it as a residential area. So all that is saying is that it's linking back to the existing residential zones, and we've got a number of them and there's different standards, and saying where relevant in that instance. So it leaves it over to the actual applicant itself doing the EOI to say, in this instance, we want to choose a particular residential zone to apply to this site, which is why we're saying generally consistent with the relevant provisions. It doesn't say you have to adhere to it in every part, but the relevant parts that might be useful for consideration of SHA are factored into as part of the policy.
Just to be clear then, so does that mean that using your example, there's a bit of industrial land that's been zoned industrial, an SHA has been applied for and is about to be granted for that bit of land. You'll take the rules and regulations that are applicable to going to get the wording wrong
Well,
here.
one of 3 residential
Yeah,
zones.
one of our residential thing, and plonk them in there.
Yep.
And that shall be the case for that until such time as there's another district plan done or something like that.
Well, the SHA itself is created under a separate act. It's not created under RMA. So all it does, once the SHA declaration's in place, it just allows for resource consent to be applied for under the HASHA Act, right? So you need the SHA in place before they can actually apply for the qualifying development. So all it allows for is how would that application be treated for the underlying zoning in the part of district plan would be industrial. We have an SHA over the top, it adopts residential provisions and is assessed in accordance with the relevant parts of the district plan. So which are then preferenced at the bottom of the actual list of criteria under the Act.
Okay, so that what you just said sounds awfully like a plan change. Is it analogous to a plan change?
It's like that. But it's
a circumvented
it's a much
way
more
to do it.
truncated process.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you. I just want to try that. Would it be better or more accurate to replace D with, Council acknowledges that the need for the SHAs has arisen due to the overall uselessness of the POPD and that much of the PODPD zoning is utterly bizarre, schizophrenic, primitive and a primary cause of the housing crisis?
Yes or no, please?
No.
Thanks.
You don't think that's the rationale?
No.
Okay.
Is that all, Gary?
No. So we're on page 40 and it's A1. So it's the wording of A1, it's not out of the graph. It talks about aims and targets of the accord with 1 year of being declared. Just to be clear, does that mean the infrastructure has to be in place? Is that what it says?
No. So this policy A1, the demand for qualifying development actually is referenced in the Act itself, and it's an important consideration. Because the whole purpose of, as I said earlier, around declaration of SHAs is that they are real opportunities where someone's actually going to build and develop something, as opposed to just getting a paper book value and sitting on it and not doing anything.
Just so I'm clear, so SHAs will likely be in places where the infrastructure is easy to do or it's already in place. Is that right?
It's much easier for someone to get an SHA if it's in a site where there is infrastructure. We don't preclude the possibility of SHAs being declared if someone's willing to pay for the infrastructure or mitigate the effects on our network as a consequence of being SHA. The qualifying development is demonstrating that there's an actual demand for that development. It's in the Act itself. Yeah. So it's basically saying, hey, this development, there's a need for it, right, which is pretty easy to demonstrate, and we're going to develop it, and we want to see it done within 1 year of the SHA declaration itself.
And this is in the context of this is how you qualify it, this is how you rank them, and so obviously one that's got lower infrastructure needs or infrastructure needs that can be met within the 1 year would rank ahead of something that's not. Is that the way I'm reading it?
No. So the demand, so the qualifying development is a particular reference to what any subsequent development that's approved under the SHA legislation. That's what it's referred to. So if you've got a SHA, you've got a declaration, the Minister gazettes it.
Yeah.
Then someone comes in for a qualifying development application.
Okay. So
the demand for the qualifying development is what we're asking for.
So there are two steps here. There's getting the legislative approval to changing the zoning.
Yeah, so the Minister declares the SHA and then they apply for the application to get the resource consent under the SHA.
So does the application to get an SHA, does that not go through this ranking process also?
Yeah, so this policy is about selecting SHA's areas. It's not about then approving qualifying developments once the SHA, that would be just like a normal regular consenting process that'll be processed by PGU or other people within the organisation. This is a policy whereby the council can strategically consider options for special housing areas to be declared, and the way in which we think about whether or not we want to recommend those to the Minister.
Okay. Just page 41. Sorry, it's A6, and there's a heading that halfway down A6 it says these housing outcomes will cover, And then we have, and again, I'm harking back to what Thomas was saying this morning, and I've got no idea what he was talking about, but I assume it could have been these sort of things. This seems really prescriptive in terms of 20% shall be provided by private housing, talks about small sizes and all sorts of stuff. Isn't that the problem we got into? That because our district plan was so prescriptive, and this is what he, so it's not me, it's a guy who knows a bit more about this business than I do, saying that, and I don't know if this is his issue, but would you like to respond? That seems very prescriptive to me. Why wouldn't we be less prescriptive and we'd have more opportunity?
So that's I'll answer that. So this particular policy evaluative criteria is about how can this policy deliver two things. One, actually increase the overall supply of dwellings in the city outside of the RMA framework. And two, is there also an opportunity under this policy to deliver affordable housing? Now, in the briefing that I gave to elected members prior to Easter, we looked at the way in which this policy could be used to address both supply and affordability. What we're saying is that we don't think we can intervene at a price point, set a target and say you must sell at 480, you must sell at 80% below. It's too hard to monitor, very hard to implement. There's potentially legal issues around its applicability in any event. About actually setting a price point, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So what this does?
It's a price control thing, eh? Yeah.
Well, it's based on some very solid evidence and research that we've done. So what we know is in Hamilton, looking at all of our consents that have been issued since 2005 to now, so prior to the most recent uplift in housing prices, is that there is a demand for smaller dwellings for some sectors in the community. Equally, we know that in terms of the median house price in Hamilton, houses that are on smaller sections, that have a smaller footprint, sell at or below the median. So we're proposing this in the policy to test it through consultation to say the market can deliver houses at a what we think is a very moderate land size and GFA, 20% if you're getting an exceptional special housing area provision placed on you. The council can be smart and drive two outcomes simultaneously. Now, the market's already delivering duplexes at 200 square metres, so we know that it's possible. We know that at the moment. So that's an initiative in the district plan. You can get a duplex house down to 200 square metres and you can subdivide. That's a very, very small housing typology for Hamilton. This is bigger than that, and we think it's a win-win in terms of getting a social affordable housing outcome and increasing supply at the same time. So that's why it is prescriptive, Gary. What we're saying is we're not saying all of the development has to be this, but we're saying at scale, if you're 10 or more, 20%, so 2 out of 10, can be sold at the private market in any way they want. They can be let out in any structure that they see, because we think that the data supports a more affordable product at that size, and that's what we're considering putting in the policy for you to think about today.
Is that the best way of addressing it, by being prescriptive about the structure of how big your land is, how big your footprint of your building is? Are there other ways of realising that without being so prescriptive?
There are other ways. I just don't think that they would work in this instance. And whether or not the actual legislation itself allows for greater specificity around what the price point should be. We see this as a really simple proxy to deliver dual outcomes. It's easy for us to monitor, it's easy for the market to deliver, and it's based on evidence, it's based on fact, it's based on our very detailed analysis of consents and the spread of consents and the correlation with that against median house price over a 12-year data set. So it's a decision collectively for this council to make.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I just add to that, just to address that point? The evaluation criteria that you're working your way through in Schedule 1 to the schedule is the criteria that will guide council in its decision making on whether to support a proposal for an SHA.
Is that ours? That hasn't come from the government.
No,
this is our effort to do it.
That's yours. But I just want to draw your attention, Councillor, to clause 20 of the policy, which is back on page 39, because that's the provision of the policy that gives you the flexibility to move away from the sort of criteria that are identified in Schedule 1. So you've reserved a discretion, an absolute discretion, to accept an SHA that comes forward that might not necessarily align with those provisions that you're just exploring with Luke.
Okay.
So if someone was to come forward and say, well, I'm not delivering this, but I'm achieving the purpose of the Act in a different way, you've reserved the discretion in the policy to say, well, we like that and we'll get on board with that.
Wouldn't, thank you, so does that have to go to the minister? I don't quite
No,
propose.
that's yours. So this is your policy. That's your decision-making process. So if you
then it gets recommended to
and
the
then
minister,
you would
so-
make a decision to recommend it to the minister, but you've reserved the absolute discretion there.
So wouldn't you then, that whole discretion, that whole thing there about getting affordable houses, wouldn't you say that council will invite and accept proposals for any form of housing configuration that achieves a price point below a certain amount, say, rather than saying it has to be percentage of square metres and things like that? Because who knows what sort of, what the market will exist, people in, my understanding is people in Hong Kong are happy to live in shoeboxes,
Well, we did look at that extensively.
So, because the goal is not to have properties that small, the goal is to have homes that are affordable.
Yes.
So why do you have a proxy not about the affordability but about the size and all that sort of
Because
thing?
those things are shown through our data analysis that buildings on sites of that size or below, or of that floor area below, typically sell at or below the median. Okay. So rather than saying you must develop a product and sell it at 80% or 75% of it, we just can't. I don't think we can go there. It's too difficult to implement. This on the other hand sets a very clear signal that we think is quite achievable. It's already above what a lot of the market's already delivering at the moment, and allows us to achieve two policy outcomes at the same time.
I just think this is needlessly restrictive.
Gary, that's part of the debate.
Yeah,
question.
I think this is needlessly
No,
restrictive.
Gary,
and I can't see why you can't
Gary,
see, why can you,
Gary,
I'm asking
no,
you.
no, you're not asking. You're
Sakes,
making,
mate.
Gary,
Can I-
you're making speeches and then tacking a question onto the end. You've also been going for over half an hour, and I want to give some.
I've clearly done a lot of work on it, Dave.
Yeah, and I appreciate
And I
that.
know this is very important for the city.
Yes, and it's also very important that other councillors have the opportunity to ask some questions. If everyone spoke for that long, we wouldn't even finish this item today, let alone any of the other items yet to go. So I'm going to go on to the next question. I'm going to come back to you before the end for any further questions. It may actually be that some of the other councillors have thought of the same questions, believe it or not. Now I'm going to go to Paula now. Thanks.
Thank you. So just to clarify, you are going to come back for debate, for comments?
Yes, correct.
Because I've just got three small things to say there, but I'll just stick to these two questions for now. One of them is around should there be, or what thought has been given to weighting of those principles? The schedules have a lesser weight because you've already said, Lachlan, that they can be overridden by the discretion of council. So the schedules are the least strong part of the policy if the policy goes ahead. What work has been done in terms of weighting some of the other criteria? I can comment when I come to my bit, but that's the question. The second, the only other question I've got was, Luke, around the two-bedroom. I understand the small lot, the small price, that the two bedrooms is quite specific. I wonder what data information do we have about what type of accommodation people actually need and are likely to buy, rather than just making it small for small's sake, small to be less expensive? You know, how do we inform what is required? Those are the two questions, please. So weighting
Chairman,
first.
if I deal with the weighting issue first, then Luke, if you want to deal with the other one. So the weighting issue. So remember, there's two stages to this process. The first is to evaluate a proposal to accept a special housing area. And then once a special housing area has been established, there is then a consenting process that occurs at that second stage. This policy is just dealing with the acceptance of a special housing area to begin with. So the answer to the question is there is no weighting in terms of the evaluation contained within this policy. so in terms of the principles and the purposes and so on, no particular criteria
Okay.
has got a greater weighting than the other. But when you get to the evaluation of a proposal once an SHA has been established, the Act is very, very clear that the primary consideration is to give effect to the purpose of the HASHA. Now, the purpose of the Act has been paraphrased in Section 3 on page 37 in the background and legislative intent. So in the second line where it says the purpose of HASHA is to enhance housing affordability by facilitating an increase in land and housing supply in certain regions and districts listed in the schedule of the Act. That is the purpose of HASHA, and that is the primary consideration once a special housing area has been established. So when you're considering a resource consent within an SHA, that's your number one consideration.
And before that, you just round up all of those things that are contained in the implementation criteria and the principles, and you have a generalised assessment around that.
Yep, and then once you're through the first gateway, that becomes the number one consideration.
Thank you, that's clear, thanks. And the 2 bedrooms, persuade me that Hamilton needs 2 bedrooms.
Look, that's just based on, in terms of the housing needs assessment that MSD do. There's a Ministry of Social Development, so they do a lot of extensive research around affordability and need, and it's really what we're talking about is the people on low incomes can generally be people on their own, or they're single parents with maybe one or two kids, and that's driving that sort of in terms of what's being provided by the market at an affordable rate. And that's informed our thinking. But we're not saying, this doesn't prescribe that it has to be 2 bedrooms or even three bedrooms. So 150 square metres GFA is actually a reasonable size dwelling, and you can probably get a 3-bedroom dwelling on there relatively easily.
Okay, given what Lachlan just said about the considerations, you know, you as long as you're meeting the Act.
Yes.
That's fine. Does MSD include the projections about ageing and that? So we're going to have
aged. So
All
yeah,
right,
so young, so single people, either aged or younger, or small families.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Dave, page 33, number 91. I'm also interested in the affordability criteria that Councillor Mallett was referring to. Can I ask, just with the 20% ratio that we're talking about, can you just explain to me what science has gone into that?
Look, the 20% is really just one in terms of analysis the staff have done of what we think would be acceptable in the market, right? So there's no, we know that in some jurisdictions, 50% of a project should be mandated to be set for affordable housing. We've taken a much more conservative approach around that, because this is, in terms of a policy outcome, this is something that's quite new for the city, and we're wanting to test it through consultation. And we think 20% is something that, you know, for every 10 dwellings, 2 of them are at the lower end. Seems to be something that we think can be borne by private developers who just have to construct a smaller dwelling and not have to have any obligations around making sure that it sells at a certain point, because we think that those proxies show that it will sell at below the median.
Yeah, no, it's something I'm pretty supportive of. But I note that in 93, it says that over the last decade, it hasn't been happening. The market hasn't really been doing that. Construction of houses over 150. They've been building them bigger.
Yeah, that's right. So if you look at the distribution of all houses in terms of GFA over that 12-year period, the market's actually not building a lot of them. So I accept your point in terms of the data set, but there is a strong correlation between the number of those houses at that size and price point. The market is generally providing houses between sort of 150 to 250. That's the bulk of the distribution, and then they really tail off again as they get quite bigger.
Okay.
So yes, take your point that, you know, the absolute number of houses being delivered at that GFA or lower is not being generated by the market, but we know that proxy correlates with with the sales point, which is why I suppose equally if it's not being done by the market, we're putting it in the policy that might create a prod, if you're not, for want of a better term, to actually for the market to deliver those things, because they're getting the benefit of SHA status.
And what conversations have there been with developers on this particular issue? Have
Look,
we talked to them about it?
Just the
about this
property
figure?
council. So
Okay.
we have talked with the property council. So Mr. Gibbons was in here earlier today. We actually met with him in April.
Yep.
We talked him through the same presentation that we gave elected members on this topic back in April itself, prior to Easter. He was aware of our intentions around the affordability criteria. That was something that we made clear to elected members at that presentation, and equally we gave them a heads up that this was something we were thinking about.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Mark, thanks.
Yeah, just on that same line, so we provide 20% of dwellings and 150%, you say, 150 metres. So small houses, basically. So we're not saying price point injection, we're saying small houses.
Slightly smaller than what's on average being developed. Yep.
Say demand keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. What's our benchmark for affordability? Because if there are more people coming to Hamilton than land we can supply, then even wealthy people won't be able to afford a 150 metre dollar.
Yeah, look, and that's something that we need to keep monitoring and, you know, in terms of both how we're tracking against the Accord and the policy itself. So I suppose at any time the council can change the policy, and if the data is saying to us, look, those proxies for affordability need to shift because the prices are shifting or there's a change in the supply and demand dynamics, then that's something we can address through an amendment to the policy.
I guess what I'm thinking, if I'm a developer, and rightly so, I'd want to get the most money for every metre I build.
Yep.
So I'd build a really flash 150 and still sneak under that threshold.
Look, and that's certainly a possibility, and that's something that we equally were aware of, but we can't prescribe the level of finish, I suppose, in the policy. We just think that this is something worth exploring.
No, and I appreciate that what you're trying to do with it. With the hang on, I've lost my place. 2 seconds. Oh yeah, one of these principles here, Principle C and number 14 on page 38. Council work. Oh no, just before you answer that question, the question I was going to ask is, we say that 20% of our SHAs need to be of a certain size. At what point do we measure that? Because say we suddenly open up a development, you know, or in a factory that we're going to turn into housing, I presume. Do we say 20% of that specific project, or is it of each individual project, or is it of a massive project?
It's for each SHA. So,
each one.
So there's so what we're saying is that if you're looking at coming through an expression of interest proposal to us, and you're saying, here's my site, this is how I demonstrate, and look, 20% or whatever the final policy is, then they're demonstrating how they would achieve that on the development by saying, look, here's, you know, there's 20 townhouses and 4 of them are going to be at 350 square metres always.
So say, for example, I bought the council building, you would say 20% of that has to be certain size.
Well, ultimately, there is that, as Lachlan explained earlier, there's a discretionary decision that council could make.
Yep.
You could still recommend it, even if they didn't achieve that, but the policy as it stands in this version is, yes, we would be seeking that.
Right, okay. And yet, if I turned up and I'd bought Harrowfield, which may become affordable soon, then is there any suggestion that I must immediately put that 20% of the smaller houses in there? Sorry if these questions are a bit basic.
No, so basically if someone had come through and as an SHA declaration they got their qualifying development, they would just build their project, and that 20% would just be built along with the rest of the project.
Right, but they couldn't just leave it till last and wait, because I'm thinking if I was a developer and I bought a huge chunk of land, and okay, my only prerequisite was that 20% of those dwellings had to be under that certain size, I'd leave them till last, wait till the value went up, and then pop, they're
Look, how they roll out the staging and their construction timetable, the policy's silent on that. That's a decision for the landowner.
Okay, and thank you. And question, so 14C, page 38, council will work collaboratively with private housing providers, etc., to increase housing supply and opportunities for affordable housing. How, what's the intention of that? Are we going to be proactively collaborative or just?
Yep, so proactively, so I've, in terms of the consultation done to date in relation to this policy, we've had a discussion with Habitat for Humanity, had a discussion with a couple of other community housing providers.
Great.
Housing New Zealand we've had a conversation with as well, and we'd want to do that again once this policy is out for consultation to elicit their views.
So would it be worth putting the word proactively in that principle perhaps? Or would that affect it in any way, or just I'm trying to keep the intention alive?
Look, I think it could be added in there and it wouldn't necessarily offend the principles.
Okay, yeah, all right, thank you.
Thanks. Angela, please.
Thanks for your patience. Haven't you heard Roxanne? You don't have to put...
Just speak up.
Anyway, there we go. I'm just on page 41, under the criteria, under affordability A6, and excuse my ignorance here, I relay, when we talk about square metres, I just think of my own house and that gives me an idea of the size of things. Housing outcomes will cover... B there says will be required to provide at least 20% of the allotments at smaller sizes of 350 square metres. So when you're talking about allotments, you're talking about a section?
Yes.
Is that right? So the section will be smaller than 350 square metres. So, yeah, I get that. And then the one above that, A, is 20% of the dwellings should comprise two-bedroom dwellings of 150 square metres. That's right. So that's the house.
Yes.
That would include garage and everything, because I thought my house was a reasonable size, but this is bigger than mine. Now, when we talk, and I think it's a fallacy, all of this stuff around affordability, but in the policy, and that's come from the government, from MB, is that we are a city that's now unaffordable because the average income, they work it out 6.8 times, which is a $140,000 house. How under this affordability is anyone ever, under those sizes, is anyone ever going to be able to produce a house for the price of $140,000? Because the average income in this city is $27,700. That's the average income. So how is it worked out that this can deliver affordable housing?
So I'm just not quite following you.
So at the start of the policy, we're referencing MB. The government has said that Hamilton's now unaffordable, because remember 2 years ago we were affordable, and they worked it out over New Zealand that it's 6.8% of...
6.8 times.
6.8 times the median average income. Well, Hamilton is $27,700 is the average income, according to census and and all the other information that we've got. So that works out to a $184,000 home. That just doesn't. Do you see where I'm going? I'm just testing the information. Yeah. I don't know.
Look, I suppose there's a number of different measures going on here. So first of all, the criteria by which the council can be scheduled on the Act is triggered by an affordability ratio in the HASHA legislation. That's the Demographia Affordability Index. And that's a ratio of median household income to median house price. So Hamilton exceeded that. The Minister included us on the schedule.
Yep, I get that.
All this affordability criteria does is enable an opportunity for dwellings of a certain size to be produced at those floor areas or land areas, because our analysis shows that they sell below the median. So we're defining an affordable housing outcome as something that's being at the median or below the median.
House price.
House price. So what we know is a house price, houses being sold in Hamilton versus the size of that house or the section that house is on, generally will sell at or below the median. and that's what we're using to define an affordable housing
And what's our
outcome.
median, about 570 now?
Mid-fives, yeah.
Mid-fives, yeah.
Yep.
All right, there's a little bit of inconsistency around that for me, but we're just going on government measures. On page 40, A3, under, and I'm still sticking with the criteria that we're going to assess things under, A3, predominantly residential. The second sentence there talks about any non-residential activities should be ancillary to the development, but that also takes in reserves and open spaces, etc. Does that at all open the risk of having a special housing area with 80 houses and no green space, because it says that those should be ancillary to the development? Like, I'm concerned that that sort of opens a door for, yeah.
So the intention of
Pretty
including
bad
that there is that that's once again the predominant residential reference is taken straight from the Act. So what that provides for is some SHAs, for example, if they are in a business centre location, someone might do a development that's got a few shops on the bottom and some apartments at the top. It's predominantly residential, so it can still qualify. So even though those shops might be ancillary to the overall residential development, those other references relating to including reserves and open space areas, or commercial and community activities. So that's just in terms of the reserves component, there might be they might want to dedicate some part of the development as part of a reserve, and it's just saying that has to, that it's an ancillary component of that development. And if they want to dedicate it to us, then that's something that we need to square off before the final declaration.
Yeah, you're explaining to me, Luke, something that I already understand. My concern here is the risk of that a special housing area, if it ticks all the other criteria and fills everything and council's satisfied, we could have a special housing area in the city with 80 homes and not one green space.
Well, that's a decision that you would, if we brought something like that to you, that's a decision for the council to make. But when we talk about the design quality issues as well, and the application of the PODP, there is an opportunity for us at the time of receiving the expression of interest to look at that to see if there was an ability to generate some sort of open space as part of the development, if there was a need for it identified by staff. But ultimately that decision as to whether or not there's an adequate provision of open space will be assessed by us for you to determine if you find that acceptable or not before recommending it to the Minister.
Okay. Just back on affordability on page 41 under A6, the second paragraph there, it says that qualifying developments will be assessed against the need for development to remain profitable and commercially viable. To whom? To the developer or to us in regards to
the
infrastructure?
developer, to the person taking on the risk.
So it's commercially viable, has to be commercially viable to them, and who assesses that?
That will be a set of information that they'll provide to us, presumably if they feel that the provision of an affordable housing component is going to somehow impact their viability of the project, that it can't get underway. They would, I'd imagine they'd include that as part of the documentation, as part of their proposal. We would assess that, and if we had some queries about the veracity of that information, we could seek some external peer review of that.
Okay, but it is something that we would take, well, you would assume that a developer's not going to come to us with something that's not commercially viable to them anyway. I just wondered about that, including that into our policy. And just on the page 40 on A1, I think this has been answered, but I wanted to clarify that council satisfied that there is evidence that the proposed development, blah, 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 will deliver new residential housing. So deliver within 1 year, etc. Deliver means completed for sale, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we expect that it's actually constructed within that period. Once 1 year within the declaration of the SHA.
So the process would be, developer identifies an area, comes to us, we apply the criteria, we agree they've got 1 year to complete that development.
They would come in, get their qualifying development consent,
Yeah,
and then they need to construct.
and then they've got to do it in 12 months.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
That's what we're seeking there. We're seeking an immediate supply.
Okay, and Luke, did you have any concerns about what the Property Council raised this morning in terms of where our draft policy is at?
Look, we're always, that's the whole purpose of my recommendation around consultation. We want to elicit views from the community. We have had an engagement with them prior to reporting this today. If there's helpful suggestions they've got to make, we're very happy to work with them. I think Mr. Gibbons' comments today were pretty general.
Okay.
It's hard for me to kind of get a direct feel what exactly he had issue with, but we'll continue to work with him.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew.
So can I just ask, when you go to page 37 and under draft, bullet point 3, sorry, number 3, and this is taken from the Act, I take it, Lachlan? So it says the purpose of the special housing area is to enhance housing affordability, and then it gives the reason how, and it's saying by facilitating an increase in land and housing supply in certain regions and districts. So the purpose of the Act is to, what quite clearly says, to facilitate, is to enhance housing affordability by facilitating an increase in land and housing supply. So why are we forcing smaller size sections and smaller size buildings when that's not the purpose of the Act? I mean, it's quite clear the purpose of the Act is to get more land onto the market, and people are going to bring more land onto the market that they know they can sell, and that they know they can, and building sizes that they know they can lease. So why are we forcing the hand by introducing our own opinion of how we're going to apply affordable housing when the Act clearly says that it's by increasing the supply of land?
Mayor King, through you, Mr. Chair. Look, you're right. And in my covering report, at paragraph 96, I outline the options on affordability criteria. So I've made it clear in the report that there is no specific requirement in formulating a policy that you need to include those provisions. So that is an option for council. What I would say is, notwithstanding the purpose of the Act, which seeks to drive affordability through increasing supply, there are provisions in the Act in relation to specifying affordability provisions, and they are referenced in the Act. So they are contemplated not in the purpose, but the Act itself at section 14 talks about the ability for affordability provisions to be included as part of an SHA declaration. So while I agree with you, the purpose of the Act is to drive affordability through supply. That's how the Act sees it, but it does contemplate the ability for SHAs to have something to say about that. And that's the reason why we've taken, I suppose, the opportunity within the wider legislation to look at an affordability outcome, but the council is not obliged to include it, and it's an option for you to not include it.
So can I ask my seconder if he's okay with the removal from the policy of the affordability section, and also if we can add a C to when we're consulting, whether we can also consult on whether we need a policy at all, or whether the Act itself is good enough.
Sorry, Andrew.
Yes.
I think better if you do that offline, because there's two different parts that I've seen.
Okay, so I have talked to my seconder and he's agreed.
Have you got a wording for the removal of the affordability part? No, not for that bit. Yeah, that's what I'm worried about, is we'll have a big long discussion about that. If you can work out the wording of that, and that's fine, we'll put it up. But have you got any other questions at the moment?
No, that's my only other,
Yeah.
if we
Well,
can.
well, I'm going to go back to Gary for further questions.
Sure.
If you can get the wording of that bit done, and then we'll come to the resolution and the debate. Gary.
Thank you. I'm just very interested in what Andrew just said. So, the purpose of the Act, does the Act say nothing about affordability?
No, it does. It just says that its purpose is to drive affordability through supply, but there is a section in the Act where it talks about the ability for affordable housing criteria to be included by the Minister in certain SHAs. So it's not included in the purpose, but it's contemplated because other policies around the country have much more prescriptive controls or policy provisions about affordability.
Okay. So if we accept that the primary focus is supply, and the goal we're after is more affordable housing, supply is just a matter of increasing. Well, I suppose there's more than just increasing land, though, isn't it? It's the supply of houses, which means land and someone
buildings.
building it and the
building
cost
it.
of the building and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Okay. So we get more land by changing zoning. That's the right way of saying it. We're changing zoning from industrial or retail to some sort of residential. How do we? Do we run the risk of not maximising supply by having regulations that drive up the cost of building? And those are some of those things, I think, in terms of the 20% and all those sort of that sort of care. And I think, again, I harken back to what, and I didn't know, what's his name? Thomas was going to say, I didn't know he was coming. So, but yeah, I think he was alluding to those sorts of things.
I wouldn't want to speak for Mr Gibbons, but I suppose what we do know is that the evidence that we have from the data sets show that land size and that GFA, that they're generally sold at a lower cost. So I wouldn't support the concept that those proxies will make housing more affordable, because we know that houses at that size and configuration are selling for less than the median. But as I said, it's an option for the council to include that. It's not a mandatory thing, but as I said, the intention is to get two outcomes: drive overall supply and some affordable supply.
Okay, Luke, do we risk because and my words not yours, because there are, and Thomas's words not yours, because there are quite a few prescriptive components of the policy, are we at risk of eliminating? I guess any restriction, because that is a restriction on supply, isn't it? If you restrict things, less will come to the market. So do we risk working against ourselves by doing that?
No, I think this policy is very enabling.
But you would have thought the district plan, and no disrespect,
Let him finish, Gary.
you would have thought the district plan was enabling too, wouldn't you?
I'll come to your second question. I'll answer the first one. Look, if you think of the locational considerations, what we are saying is that we're actually actively contemplating the creation of SHAs everywhere in the city, except for a few areas because they've got natural hazards or they've got a special character area. So this policy has potentially very enabling, right? The checks and balances that we've got in there are to enable us to think very carefully about the loss of employment land. So employment land is also important for this city. We don't want a city that's just full of houses. We want jobs and we want the economy to grow. So we're saying we can think about SHAs in any location that's currently set aside for employment. We just want to understand what the effect of the loss of that employment land looks like before we make a recommendation, because once it goes to housing, it's gone. Equally, the other issue, what we want to know about is about infrastructure, and that's a really significant issue for us. It's about our balance sheet and about the costs that we bear as a community in terms of enabling a housing outcome. It's no different to what we've already got in terms of our growth funding policy. So The affordability criteria, once again, that's founded in evidence. We know that the market's already producing dwellings of that size at a certain price point. Let's test it through consultation and see whether or not it's overly prescriptive. But I don't see the content in here in terms of the evaluating framework as restrictive. It's very enabling. It's been thought through and considered, and it's based on a significant amount of research and testing, both internally and with some other places around the country that have got SHA policies.
Okay, one of the issues you had then was the whether we can afford the infrastructure, but my reading of this is that is almost, I mean, for an SHA to be approved, I think I'm hearing from you, we're expecting the developer to stump up.
Well,
for just about everything.
Only if there's a place where it's already not serviced, or it's going to have significant impacts on our network. There might be some SHA areas in the city that are on residential sites that are of scale where there's no development.
So in that situation, we've already got the infrastructure
already there.
So
issue.
there is no
issue.
In actual fact, in that situation, we actually get a economy of scale because we're using. Okay, so. Yeah. So that's not an issue for our checkbook. That's actually a good thing for us because there's rates coming with no increase in capital expenditure. And the other situations where there is capital expenditure required, unlike currently zoned residential stuff, I think I'm putting words in your mouth. We're expecting the developer to stump up with all of it, which is a better deal for the city than our current scenarios.
That's right. So if we had a project that was in the future urban zone in one of our growth cells and it was not funded in our LTP, and someone said, look, I'm ready to go here and I'm prepared to pay, there's no reason for us not to let that happen. As long as we know that the effects on our total infrastructure are understood, as long as there's no net cost to council, this policy enables that opportunity to happen outside of an RMA schedule.
How realistic is that to happen? I know that's hard because you don't know what's out there.
Look, I do know that there's a lot of interest in the concept of SHA, so I've had a number of discussions with various parties. I wouldn't want to disclose the content of those at this point, but that's the point of the consultation, that we'll get some feedback, we'll see what comes out of it, and hopefully amend the policy so that it is as effective as it can be for the city.
Given that you're asking them the developers to, in certain situations, to stump up with 100% of the cost of growth, which is greater than we normally would, do you think it's advisable for us to be putting, my words not yours, undue restrictions on what they can build and what they can't build? And I'm not, I'm talking about things that'll impact, traffic. There's a whole lot of things I think we should, stop happening, But there's a lot of things about just the size of the house. What's that got to do with? What the heck has that got to do with it? Those sort of things. To me, if the guy's going to be spewing sewage into the water or smoke into the air, or there's going to be a massive number of traffic movements, or there's going to be lots of noise, those are impacts that we should stop. But just because he's got a different size house than mine has, or something like that, okay, and mitigating, and that brings in matters of stormwater, I understand. But if you've mitigated all those real effects, the other stuff doesn't matter when you're talking about people and trying to put people into a house.
The policy is not about mitigating effects in relation to affordability. It's about saying, do the elected members of this council want to have a policy that does two things that aren't mutually exclusive? We bring on more supply, and at the same time, we might be able to get some additional affordable housing that the market's not currently delivering. That's a decision ultimately that you will need to make. We think there's a good case for achieving both that won't undermine the commercial delivery outcomes that we're wanting to seek. But as I said, it's an option in the policy. It's there for you to think about. We think it's something that is worthy of consideration, at least in terms of testing it through consultation.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions we have. We're just going to spend a little bit of time sorting out the resolution we've got, and if there's any amendments, put them up on the board, then we'll have the debate. Okay? So at this stage, we've got A, B, C, D. Moved by Mayor Andrew and Councillor James. Just have a read of that. I'll call for any amendments, and in a sec. And so you're happy with that wording? That's what you want? Okay. So are there any amendments to that?
Yes, I'd like to move an amendment, basically removing C. So it would, the effect of that would, it would keep the affordability provisions in the policy, and so D would become C.
It'd be quite good if we could just have that C highlighted in yellow, and then we, as it is now, then we can see the whole thing, and we know what we're talking about. It's a question of, for this amendment, whether C's in or out. If we're having a seconder to Councillor Taylor's amendment, seconded by Councillor Bunting. So just if we highlight, oh, yeah, okay, that does the same job, fine. Yep, so that you can see what the amendment is. Are there any other further amendments which would be foreshadowed? If not, Gary?
I just have a question. To me, because this is a very complex matter, the period of consultation is quite short. Perhaps Andrew or someone might, I mean, this, I'm not really trying to...
No, it's been suggested by the Chief Executive, so we it's a fair point because it's been reduced from what was sent to us by a week, and it also doesn't have any years on it or anything. So do you mean this 3 weeks this year, and which 3 weeks? And is that not short?
So 3 weeks, as I mentioned when I introduced it, is the bare minimum that we can get away with. From a good consultation point of view, the more consultation you have, the more robust your process is. 3 weeks is the minimum by we believe it will still be robust. So you can add more in if you choose to, but the bare minimum, I wouldn't recommend any less than 3 weeks.
Is there any, there's no reason that we would want to get, there's no rush for this? Well, I suppose it is, there's people who can't afford houses, but is there any deadline or something like that that you're working to? There's
no, I just put forward the most expedited approach.
How long do we normally do for an annual plan and thing? Oh, we don't do that anymore.
We go anywhere up to 2 weeks plus 3 weeks annual plan. Okay. We did 4 weeks. I think we've done 8 weeks in other situations. We've done 3 months.
Okay.
Gary, you're perfectly at liberty to propose a change to that, and there would be a separate amendment from this, because it'd be an amendment. I would take that be the length of time one as a separate amendment.
Okay. I guess I just asked the question because there will be lots of people out there. You know, the property council, those guys will be keyed into this, and a lot of other guys will do. But a lot of developers may or may not be, I don't know. And those sort of guys are going to be...
Yeah, rather than a speech on it, you're going to test
I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay, well...
Look, I've got nothing better, so leave it at 3. That's okay. Well, I'm not sure that's enough.
Yeah, so entitled to raise it. Mayor Andrew?
My seconder agrees. I'm happy to leave I'm happy to leave affordability, to take C out. I mean, it's going out for consultation. This is about feedback from the public. So, and it just saves us going through the whole amendment.
James, you're the seconder of that resolution. I agree with that. What? You agree? What he said? Okay, so there's no... It goes A, B, C now, and C... The amendment's won without a fight.
To keep us procedurally safe, Chair, can you just formally do a show of hands?
Okay, show of hands. The approval is the mayor, the mover and seconder of the motion have proposed removing their C with the strike through it at the moment, which is Jeff's amendment. They've proposed basically adopting that amendment as part of the resolution, so I'm seeking approval of the meeting by a show of hands for that to happen, now that's up on the board. Could those people who agree with removing C please raise their hands? Yeah, it's all right, Gary, you don't have to vote for it, there's no requirement, and then we've got the minimum 75%, is that for that, Gary? There was one vote. All bar one vote, so there were 11 votes for. I don't know what Gary was voting, but it were at least 11. I don't know what the vote was. What did we vote? I don't know. C is no longer part of the resolution. C is no longer being removed. And so no, C is no longer part of the resolution. Okay. Yeah.
So affordability is still in.
Correct. Yeah. So, did you want to revisit the weeks? So the 3 weeks, okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm just not sure how long it's 3 weeks.
Okay. I was going to ask a question of the CEO in relation to that, is when that would start and finish, because that well, would be of interest to people who are going to submit.
My understanding from the team is that we can get the consultation out, and then probably not tomorrow, but the day Friday we can commence it.
Could we say to start no later than the end of June 2017?
We intend to go hard on this and go straight out with the, there's no reason we don't.
Well, can you put some dates on it, just so that it's clear?
Yeah, so it would commence Thursday, so this Thursday the 22nd, and end, I think by my reckoning, the 14th of July.
So
For 3 weeks.
22nd of June to 14th of July inclusive? Any advance on that? I think if we state that in there, it's best.
2017.
Yep.
Yeah, that's 3 weeks.
Okay. Yep.
Or stakeholder consultation?
We're going now full consultation.
Full
Councillor.
consultation has now been approved. We removed that word targeted.
And hearings as well. Hearing.
You're ready for that, Angela? Okay. Everyone's clear on what the resolutions includes? We'll go for a board vote on the board, thanks, on that. Sorry, we better have speeches. Oh, damn. Sorry. Well, you nearly, yeah, it was only a couple of you objected. Andrew is the mover, Mayor Andrew.
For me, it's just bringing some desperately needed land to the market quickly before our big things come out, like through the HIF, like Peacocks and Rotocarry. So this is supplied to the market from now from the 1 to 3 year period. It'll take that long to get a new growth cell open anyway, and so that'll, it'll be 3 to 5 years before we fully open up a growth cell. And this goes out and asks if there's pockets of land that can come in as housing in the meantime that we haven't thought about, and which won't cost the council any money to join to the network, where there's capacity there, or where the developer takes care of the capacity to ensure it can happen. So it's a short term. This is a bit of a one-off. It's an opportunity we've been given by the government as a one-off, just to shore up things while we go for the big master plans. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula.
Thank you. Just a couple of short comments. I'm going to have to disagree with you, Gary, on this one in terms of the importance of urban design. In fact, I would like some further feedback at a future time on what high quality urban design outcomes would be, because I think that's really important. Make no bones about it, this approach, a special housing accord, areas do provide a good opportunity for Hamilton, but they will leave a legacy. They will leave something behind for a very long period of time. So we've got to do this properly, and we've got to do it well. So I just put a flag up also that I'm watching with interest to how this can and should provide a range of housing that is truly affordable and does address that entry level to the market, plus the ageing population who are downscaling from their bigger houses into smaller places. Just also we need to remember that with housing comes the need to provide facilities and services for the community. A bigger city needs libraries, swimming pools, parks, and all of those kind of things. And we're going to come into a very interesting time shortly with the LTP, grappling with how we fund a lot of this work. And so that's where I'll leave that, because I do think it's really important that we just don't grow great big subdivisions, but we grow a really good quality city, especially if we aspire to be the third most significant city in New Zealand. Then we really need to start being that. I just want to say also, and to flag that I want, when the feedback comes in, I'll be asking some questions around the consistency between the principles, the implementation criteria, and some of the matters that sit in the schedules. I'm not quite sure that it's 100% perfect in respect to that detail, But because it's going out to consultation where it should go, and I'll just say then I'm confident that we'll be able to nut that out. I shall say that I'm not entirely convinced about the no policy, but I'm interested there again on why you might have a policy, why you may not. It's all about the outcomes from my point of view. Good quality housing, affordable housing, those are the outcomes. Thank you.
Thanks. Angela, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, I went down this journey and supported the accord that we signed in December, and going down this journey of the policy, and I will support this, but I do remain a cynic. I think the only people that are going to benefit from special housing accords are developers. I think that the term the government has used in regard to housing affordability is a fallacy. I don't believe that there is anything, I don't believe that there is housing affordability anymore in New Zealand. And when I talk to my constituents out there who are living in, young families who are actually in their first home, they can't move up the property ladder. They're stuck. Food prices have never been higher. Wages aren't moving and haven't moved for years, and they are struggling to hold on to those homes. So by opening up areas, sure, that's going to provide new housing for people that can afford it. But I don't think we're going to see that migration of people out of, already in their first homes, out of them and moving up the property ladder. I think people are stuck, and I think they're going to remain there. As far as renters being able to move into affordable housing, the average person earns $27,000 in Hamilton. That's pretty. I don't know how they survive. They can't afford. They can barely afford to actually pay their rent. So I'm not sure that this is going to deliver. Actually, I know it's not going to deliver affordable housing. And I think that the government, we've seen over the course of the last 12 months, we've seen a softening of that language of affordable housing. We've seen it sort of pulled out of documents, discussion papers, and that really concerns me because we're not going to be able to deliver it. Having more homes in the city is great, but what I don't want to see is more areas like Killarney Road in Dinsdale, and the degradation over the last certainly 4 to 5 years of areas like Dinsdale, where people are crammed into the tiniest units with no green space. There's nothing, no areas for the kids. And the legacy that I don't want to leave is more of that. And I think that that's what Councillor Southgate was pointing her concern to. So happy to support this, very interested in the consultation. But I don't think, for me personally and for my constituents, this is going to deliver at all affordable housing. So I'll be holding back my final support through the consultation of the policy.
Thanks. Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the policy, and there's a whole lot of things that are going to be lined up for this to work, and this has come about through a number of reasons. I mean, everyone's very aware of the increased population the whole country is getting, particularly some of our bigger metros, and we're included in that. All local authorities are struggling with the cost of infrastructure. I think personally that we've scored an own goal with a very restrictive district plan. I've called it schizophrenic and lots of other things at various times. But there is one thing that I'm very, very sure of, that if this council needs to set priorities, and it does need to set priorities, surely homes have to come ahead of libraries and swimming pools. Yep, you can, if we've got all the money in the world, we can have libraries and we can have swimming pools, we can have skateboard bowls, all sorts of things. But for goodness sakes, if you've got families living in cars or in garages, you've got to get them into homes. If this can do something to help that, I'm all for it. This will not be the end of the story. This is the start of the story, but it's good that we're making a move in that direction. And thankfully, the government has allowed us to sidestep our district plan a wee bit.
Thanks. Councillor Bunting.
This won't get people into homes. This is about as effective at addressing affordability as trying to scare away a mouse by hitting it with a piece of cheese. And I appreciate, Mayor Andrew, you stood on a platform of growth, and I was going to support this, and I'm going to follow the example of my more senior councillor, Angela O'Leary, and I will support it, but by crikey, she's a very, very, very thin piece of support. We're talking about affordability not just for homeowners, but also for renters. I stand, as Gary's often said, I stand for ratepayers in the city. I don't just stand for developers. Now, I see this as incredibly developer-focused. If you're going to just affect affordability by increasing supply, you're leaving it completely over to the developers. I was encouraged when, Luke, you talked about working collaboratively with Habitat for Humanity and with social agencies, but I personally don't think this goes anywhere near far enough. A special housing accord is special. A special housing accord is special. This isn't our zoning. This is the exception to that zoning, as Gary often bangs on about. For whatever reason, it is special. And if we use this up now, we don't have anything else to use. I think we should keep the special housing accord for the intention that it was originally designed for it to provide affordable housing. The only tools we have are supplying more and making them smaller. Really? It's an exceptional special housing area. By leaving it in the hands of the developers, who's really all we're leaving in the hands of at the moment, it won't affect affordability, because why should we ask developers to develop houses they're not going to make money on? Just doesn't make sense. Mice and cheese. I would support it a whole lot more if there was stronger language directing these housing areas to work collaboratively, more proactively with the Habitats for Humanity, with the social agencies. This is what I see special housing accords as for working with those people and not just letting price be the only determinant. We're talking about houses that are not only affordable to own, but affordable to rent. And that's the only tool we've got, supply, at the moment. When we talk about the people who are likely to be using these houses, we've got to remember, councillors, we're not just talking about people who are currently living in cars. And families who live in cars, I'm sorry, don't have size restrictions either. Because all we deal with here by making houses smaller and lots more smaller houses is people who can fit in smaller houses. We're talking about trying to make Hamilton the most enticing place to work, live and play. Now, if we want people to come and work here, we've got to supply houses that they can afford to live in, not just to own, to live in. If we want to attract a labour market into this city and become the third economy in the country, we've got to have good housing to attract a decent labour market. A lot of our industries are not going to attract high-paid labour. We've got to do better with affordable housing, and I'm afraid a special housing accord should do better than this. I will support it going out to housing, to consultation, but like Angela, my support is tenuous. A special housing accord is a good idea, but in the way it's written at the moment, it's not quite special enough for me.
Thank you. Siggy.
Thank you so much. I will not say too much because the main points have already been made, and I don't either believe that this will get us anywhere, especially, with affordable housing. And I could just see there could be another way of creating something different instead of just like Councillor Bunting said, just letting the developers go on again and do the same thing as we've already have, and they're there to make money, and I get that, but we should really be thinking also about having more healthy, more green housing, more habitat, more working with social agencies, and just thinking very differently about and enabling probably other groups that have ideas about housing. And I just think of the Runanga, who is doing some great jobs there, talking to them about it. So I will support this, but again, I will listen also to the consultation, to the people that will consult with us. Thank you. Oh, one more thing I would love to see there will be property developers, of course, jumping on this. I would love to see our own eco-advisor, Ian Mays, to be involved in the process of them getting a consent. Thank you.
Thanks. Jeff.
Yeah, very quickly. Look, I support this policy. It's better than nothing, particularly when you look at the the costs that we're facing to try to develop the rest of Peacocks and Rotokauri. I mean, it's just huge cost. This at least is a mechanism to create housing in areas where hopefully we have existing infrastructure. I'm also supportive of the affordability clauses in there. Let's test them. I'm not convinced that simply providing more housing and more land in itself will will do the job completely. And in fact, I do tend to agree with Councillor O'Leary and Bunting that it's a hell of a job to try and make houses affordable again. But I have no issue with asking developers to build some of a small portion of their houses a certain size. Let's not assume that they won't do it, that they can't do it. Let's put it out for consultation and talk to them about it. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to just say a few things. I support the policy because it helps us potentially get a few runs on the board in terms of housing compared with waiting for the HIF fund. But like Angela and Mark particularly, I am quite cynical about this. I believe that affordability, however, Angela, will still be a big word until September the 23rd. Then we probably won't hear it so much after that. I think people are sort of quite right to be cynical. I would say there is housing affordability in at least a couple of areas of New Zealand still. Bennydale and Ekatahuna come to mind, but certainly not Hamilton or Auckland, really, when you really look at it. You are, however, Angela, I think you're talking about personal income at 27,000 and the figure relates to household income, which is why the multiplier, it doesn't quite work out as badly as you had it before. But realistically, this is the only game in town at the moment to get some fast things happening in the housing area. So I'll be keen to see the input we have in the consultation. But I would hope that it puts more emphasis on affordability and not sort of supply ahead of affordability, which I fear may be the case at the moment. Anyway, that's my views. Any other speakers? Oh, sorry, there's one, Martin.
Yes, I will obviously vote for this, and I do acknowledge the observations of Councillor O'Leary and other speakers. However, the great issue of our times in this country, of course, is affordability and housing, and we are seeing a slow change, in fact rapid change, to the nature of the so-called Kiwi dream, and we as a council have to use any tools at our disposal to work with central government of the day to try and address these serious issues around housing shortages, and also to do anything we can to assist young Kiwis in particular realise their dream of home ownership. And with home ownership you build capital. This is really important. Margaret Thatcher, ironic I should quote her, talked about a property owning democracy. But what that means obviously is a democracy where people have the option to have capital, to have their investment. And of course that all the evidence in terms of poverty, elder poverty, comes around building a capital base for young people that they carry on through their lives. But certainly the observations, very good speech by Councillor O'Leary actually in terms of the realities that she and others we are encountering, but we have to do anything we can, as imperfect as it might be.
Thanks, Councillor. It's going to go to the vote now. Andrew doesn't wish to write a reply, so we'll vote on the board. Thanks. Let's get on the record. You want to recast that, thanks, please? Okay, go.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thanks, councillors. We're going to move straight along because we haven't got too much time left. We're going to do item 16 now, another growth-related one, which is Te Rapa North Growth Cell, page 145. And Alice and Kelvin are delivering this. And councillors, we're going to take all of the reports as read and we're going to move straight to questions, unless there's some earth-shattering thing like a change in the report, which there is not. There is not. And there's a whole stack of maps, don't forget, to showing where this is. 153's got the first of them. So I'm open for questions on this now, and I've got Mayor Andrew first.
I'll move.
Moved by, what's the motion? I'm just looking. These are for information, it's to receive, but we're certainly going to have questions for a while yet. Gary.
And I'll second. Just to be clear, this is a information report, isn't it?
Correct.
An update of what's going on out
We
there.
asked for one on each growth cell over the first 5 or 6 meetings.
Fantastic, thank you. That's all I need to know.
Okay. Look, I've got a question, Alice, relating to the Perry's proposal for the north end of what are we calling that? Te Rapa North Growth Cell. I'm just wondering, there's a map on page, probably the one on page 155 with the orange. And I think it's the 4 northernmost blocks showing right up the north of the orange. Is that's the Perry proposal area? Pretty much?
I will defer to General Manager for that, but page 156 actually is probably a little bit more clearer because it's stage 1B, which is the Perry land holding.
Thanks. So, sorry, that's a better map, 156. Alice, what process, this is zoned industrial at the moment, what process do Perry's or anyone else for that matter have to go through to get that changed to the type of mix that they're after, which is mostly residential, that they're talking with us about now?
Yes, either one of them. But a private plan change they would be working through. And so at the moment, when they first came to us late last year, it's been through several iterations, I think, which most of you have been visited about. It'll be a private plan change, and we've been working with them since then on ensuring we understand the impact and the effects and the blockages and the constraints, and working that through so that the idea being that when they do lodge, and they've indicated they would lodge sometime in July, that there is a greater efficiency rather than going back and forth for more information. The idea is to work with them in advance of that, which is how we actually do things now with big projects. So it would be a private plan change on that basis.
Okay, I noticed on that same map on 156 there's a dotted line, sort of more or less a circle, which shows Te Rapa Dairy Factory, Fonterra's noise emissions boundary. Is that also a sort of area in which they could claim reverse sensitivity issues?
Yes, it is, absolutely, yes.
So that doesn't, this 1B that Perry's got doesn't impinge on top of that. It's I don't know, 50 metres or something away from where that starts.
Correct. So from that perspective of noise, yes, that's right. There would be, there's that slight buffer area between that, the purple dotted line and their 1B area, correct.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions I had, but we got Mark next.
Just briefly, is there any more industrial land in the pipeline other than this around?
So there's this and of course Ruakura. And so that's simply, I mean, even from the previous item that we've just had and this item is exactly the point that one of the points we were discussing, that any change to the land use requirements then requires us to look at the balance and the impact across our other, what therefore then is left for the same provision across the organisation. So that's one of the issues, that's a live issue.
Yeah, and I'm probably asking this 6 months too early, but were we to whack that tip off that, is there other places that we could compensate?
Well, correct, and that would be part of the evidence they would need to show us. Right. And of course, under the National Policy Statement for Urban Development, there is a requirement for council to undertake a new supply and demand assessment, which includes employment land and growth numbers, and we're doing that on a sub-regional basis. So, again, if they can show evidence that by changing the land use of this to residential, where is the balance that is required for employment land, that may well be in the sub-region as opposed to just the city, but that's the sort of evidence they may have to show. They could do a deal
with another province and...
Correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Or if there's existing balance within the city elsewhere.
Yeah, cool.
Sorry, Gary.
Say sorry, Dave?
Well, yeah.
You're saying sorry to everyone else that you're allowing me to speak.
I wasn't going to comment, but...
all joking aside, would this fit into the qualifications for a special housing accord?
Well, they were about to put one forward, yes. Yes, this is an example where its current land use is different to that, and if they could put forward a proposition. And again, this is the kind of example that I think you were searching for about, well, there's no provision for infrastructure currently within that long-term plan, how would they deal with that? And that's all the types of of consideration that we'd have to come back to you and say, well, on that basis, but if they were going to pay for it, what does that mean? What does it mean for allocations of water use and consent and discharge for other parts of the city? What does that mean for our allocation, our investments into, say, Peacocks or Rotokauri? So it's all that balancing act, really.
So, and I know a lot of us have been speaking to, have been presented to periods of this. And so, forgive me, I'm not overly familiar with it, but is there sufficient residential stuff in this to qualify? I mean, are we allowed to say what they're doing out there? It's mixed use. There's a lot of things they want to do out there, and it's not all residential.
And it's not all residential.
And in fact, not you wouldn't say most of it is residential, would you?
No, well, probably not in a public forum. Until they lodge it specifically. There's no at this stage. It's still conceptual.
Because we were sorry to interrupt, Kelvin, because we're just talking about private plan changes, which are a hideously expensive, long drawn out process, which our district plan which the law requires us to go through. What do you call them? Special housing accords or areas.
Would move that to a quick
sideswipe that, don't they?
They do, and this is the point I think that there was a debate, but there is still a requirement even under the Act. So even if you have a policy, we still have to give regard to all of our other planning provisions. And it's the same decision that you would have to make about if there were, say, huge amounts of residential, does that then sabotage your other investments into other parts of the city that you're about to make and then therefore make redundant and so on and so forth. So that's exactly...
Having said that, the thing, all other things being equal, the Special Housing Accord legislation or whatever it is
would provide for it,
may be way far out of their timeline. So they may be better off going straight for a plan change.
Correct.
Even though it's more expensive, well, possibly more expensive.
That's the determination they have to make.
Because at the moment, the Special Housing Accord machine isn't in place yet, is it?
Well, no, the accord is, and that's the policy now. So this is the point that Thomas Gibbons was making about: do you need to have a policy or not? Or do you just use it? So that the accord exists, and so the mechanism then by, as said, we'd have to then allocate the location based on a proposal from a proponent, then add the consenting layers, then bring that for you for acceptance to then go to the minister for sign-off. So it's not a...
Sorry, Kelvin, you said why have a policy at all? If you don't have a policy... Sorry, but I mean, Thomas's suggestion, why have a policy at all for the SHIAs?
Well, just to be clear,
and the answer to that is because if you don't have a policy, you have to go through a plan change. But are you suggesting you don't have to go through a plan change?
So just for clarity, what Thomas actually recommended was a balanced policy before he left. He did, but he just questioned. He said you could not have a policy and just use the basis of the legislation. But his recommendation when he left was that a balanced policy would be
the only lever you've got then is a thing called a plan change, which is that long, expensive process.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, are there any other questions on this? If not, we'll move to the resolution, which is to receive the report moved by Mayor Andrew and Councillor Gary. I'll take a show of hands. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, councillors, we're on to item 10, page... Sorry?
Get rid of me.
All right, we've got Chris. Is Chris still awake? Yep. We are. But that's not the next one. No, I didn't. Did you have somewhere to go, Councillor?
Hot. A number of people will have to leave, that's all.
Well, that's fine, but we're only at 4:45 now, so you're okay.
We'll be very disciplined.
You keep on top of it, and I'm sure we'll get to it all. You've been very good today, Councillor.
Yes, I have.
Can you sit next to Gary Mallett? Okay. Now, again, councillors, we're going to take this as read and move straight to questions, unless there's some changes that you want to highlight, Chris or Jason?
Just happy to answer any questions.
So you can see the photos there, councillors, and there is a section specifically on Hamilton. On what page is that? Sorry, it's near the end of that. It's the last few pages of that. Of one of the attachments, sorry. 78, thank you. It was nearly there. So page 78 is the section on Hamilton. I had a, oh sorry, Rob, I've got some questions there. Rob first.
Just one quick question, Chair, and that is, I just wonder why and I know it's NZTA, but there's only a fleeting reference in the report to rail. You know, they kind of discount rail quite quickly and they say, you know, rail's okay for long distance stuff. But we're starting to find that rail is becoming increasingly important even for short distance stuff, particularly in transporting people. And I just wonder whether we shouldn't in our submission make some reference to an increasing emphasis on rail as a means of commuter travel. How far we'll get, I'm not sure, but I think that momentum has started, and it's necessary that we should be endorsing that momentum as much as possible, particularly given that there is increasing interest in commuter rail. I won't say between Hamilton and Auckland, but certainly getting into Auckland anyway. Yeah, I think we've made a couple of substantive points in our submissions. One of those clearly is the connection we have down to Taranaki and the importance of Southern Links. The other point we've made, I think, which picks up your point, is particularly around Hamilton, it's been quite a narrow state highway focus, and we've asked for the regional land transport strategy to be given more recognition. So all of the strategic hooks you're looking for are really strong in the regional land transport strategy. So by default, it's doing that, and we could emphasise that point as well. We've made a point about passenger rail, but I think your point is about rail in general and the role. So it's inferred, is it, in our regional transport plan that rail is an important connection? Yep, it's one of the strategic corridors and connections. And we could pick it up at that, or we could just be more explicit in the submission if that's what Council decides. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for without going into the detail of where it should go.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. I might add that at the LG&Z Zone 2 meeting last Friday a week ago, we were taken out, delegates were taken out to see Tokoroa's own equivalent of Crawford Street, a freight forwarding hub, which was almost totally to forward by rail freight from just that locality over to Tauranga, which is not that far, but they were very insistent on the number of road miles that it saved, and it was quite a big thing and working quite well there. So your point is important, I think, to stress. Okay, we've got Mark next.
Thank you. I was going to ask Jason about one of our submitters we had in our last meeting, and that was Peter Boss, when he was talking about the wording of that. But am I in the wrong item for that? Yes. Remember he was talking about the wording of reducing deaths? Yeah,
so that's the Access Hamilton strategy coming up next paper. Yep.
Move on. Thank you. Sorry, Jason.
Save that one?
Yep.
Okay, Martin.
Yeah, I just noticed the interesting reference to Hamilton's population at 183,000 in 2013. Does that include Cambridge, Morris? What's the definition of Hamilton in that context, Chris?
I haven't picked that up. I'd have to.
I think it would be quite useful, just so that we're dealing with it.
It's certainly what they call the Hamilton urban area.
Yes.
I think, which includes Te Awamutu, but I'm not sure about Cambridge.
It'd be quite useful if you could so we're on the same page,
Councillor?
and I certainly want to stress.
What page were you on, Councillor?
Well, it's if you go to the regional bit, it's got Tauranga as 126,000. So I assume.
No, it's page 78. In the on the left-hand side.
78 on the left-hand side. They then talk about Hamilton and Tauranga about 126, which must include Te Puke or whatever, but it's 180,000, and we'll be 254,000 by 2043. And then I've already requested the NBR article that says apparently in 25 years we're going to be the second most populous urban area, which I'm fascinated by that, but Richard is going to circulate to us all that particular article.
Martin, just in relation
to the question,
Martin, just in relation to the population figures, it says in here what they have calculated on Statistics New Zealand ones, which is not the ones that we use here or that anyone else in the Waikato uses. So if you want to pick up that, you might be saying that it'd be consistent with future-proof. which is using the Waikato University.
Sure, and I think if I could just get our staff to so that we here, you know, on exactly, so we fully understand, which I confess to be confused sometimes on that issue. The other thing too is, can I just stress in our submission and our response, I think we really have to, picking up Rob's point, emphasise rail. And I know that they don't have a micro responsibility for rail, but as NZTA, you know, we should be stressing to them that we want them to have a more micro oversight, both of freight, obviously, which is crucial, and passenger, because we're dealing with 3 inland ports in the Hamilton area in the next, you know, 10 years or so, and obviously that's very relevant. The freight hub concept is extremely relevant to us.
Thanks. Paula.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just in picking up some of the comments around public transport, rail, etc. I noticed in our submission where we talk about it, on maybe 2.4.4, that we...
what page, Paula, sorry?
Oh, sorry, our submission 82. On page 82, on our submission point 2.4.4. I'm always in favour of a proactive statement rather than a sort of a reductive statement, if you like. And we talk about reducing our reliance on the car to achieve the investment objectives. But I would prefer to have a stronger, more positive statement around a modal shift and multimodal alternatives to roading and the multimodal transport system. It's just flipping the coin, so that we're saying, not only saying let's reduce cars, we're saying let's increase the other ways in which people can get around. That's all. Do you get what I'm... Yep.
Yep.
It's not inconsistent with their little diagram with the different modes, with the active public transport and so on. So ask for what we want, but not what we don't want necessarily.
Martin, you had another point. No, you're right. Okay. So seems to be general agreement that those points can be re-stressed. Or
rephrased. Yeah.
Yep. And Jason and Chris will take that on board. So the resolution, which is on, I can't remember what page is that on. Is that 54, thanks. Would be approved. B would need to be changed to noting the suggested amendments from the meeting at the end of B. If we add that in, I think is sufficient. There's no other questions. Did we get a mover? I'll move it. Seconded by Paula. Those in favour, raise their hands. Against? That's one vote against, Councillor Mallett. The rest are all in favour or asleep. No, sorry. Okay, so thanks for that. We're getting close to the one you wanted, Martin, but this is item 11, Access Hamilton Strategy, page 84. This is Mark's big chance. Oh, yes. But we're going to just, I'll put you top of the list, but I'll just, anything we need to...
Yeah, just take the report as read, just make one statement. We did look at this in the briefing, so just to remind councillors, this is about just signing off the 3 problem statements and objectives around safety, economic development and transport choice. The real work ahead of us is what we talked about this morning through the next Access Hamilton task force to look at the programs of work. We've got those all, we've listened to what you've told us in previous briefings. We've got them all set out in programs. We're bringing them to the next Access Hamilton Strategy Task Force along with the discretionary transport to engage with you on the program that you want to promote into the 10-year plan. So we're happy to answer any questions on that basis.
And first up is Councillor Mark.
Yes, I have a question. Peter Boss was here talking about the language change, and I'm looking at, I think it's page 97 we're referring to there, Chris, is that right?
Peter Harry Boss we're talking
about.
Peter
Harry Boss, yep. He was talking about the idea of a language change, so moving the target of deaths to 0 as opposed to having a target of 34 and 9. And that was going to be discussed at the task force. What was the discussion?
Can I answer that one, Jason? So I think the answer we've given to that one is that we want the we think the Access Hamilton strategy should align with national and regional targets on that. So at the moment, both nationally and regionally, the word they use is reduction rather than eliminate. I think that was Peter Harry-Boss's submission. We are aware, however, that there is a discussion going up through the Regional Transport Committee about the regional one where that debate is on the table, which is reduction or elimination. So our proposal is, as we're working through this, to just keep an eye on what's happening at regional and align with the regional where they can have that debate at a regional level.
So would it do any harm to take the lead in that and start by saying we're going zero, off you go? Because it's obviously not going to have, we're obviously going to try, aren't we? So why don't we just put our stake in the ground?
If council was of mind to go in that direction, it would be probably more helpful at the moment to pass another resolution for us to take that advocacy position into the regional debate.
I was going to suggest that those of us that go to the Regional Land Transport Committee would need some guidance on that, me.
Yeah.
So
if that was a view,
but I was also going to say Peter Boss's submission to us was for us to take the lead in our own area.
Yeah.
So that I think that's a legitimate point to raise and have a discussion over. I've got some other questions as well, but let's deal with that one first. And it's essentially, should we state our road death target as zero over the 10-year period, as opposed to a reduction to any amount, I guess.
That's right. So does that require a resolution, Dave? Or
I think it probably does. I mean, I don't think there's any disagreement with the principle. It's whether you state it or not in that way. I think is the point. Look, I'll open it for a quick discussion. Who'd like to speak just on that? But Leo, I've got next.
Look, a great target, but straight away, for example, Saturday night, 4 people killed out at Netherton. You've blown it. So I think something has to be achievable, and 10 years with no fatalities, injuries, good luck.
In 10 years' time, not for throughout those 10 years, I think is the proposition, Leo.
But, look, despite what people around here think, we are making huge progress. We definitely are. And it's not all doom and gloom. And when you look back at the history, we've come a hell of a long way to what people think we have. And I really think New Zealand is starting to come of age as far as the travelling public are concerned.
Who else wants to speak on that particular part of it? So I've got, Angela, are you scratching your head? Or
You're scratching my head.
Oh, sorry. I've got Gary next and then James. And then I'll go around.
On that specific one, we all know how we could eliminate all road deaths is just all start walking or riding skateboards. But your economy would revert back to some sort of savage, primitive living in the dark ages sort of thing. So that's just one of the costs you have in living in a modern society. I mean, and also there's an element of, if you set a goal, it has to be real and achievable. Otherwise you're dealing in la-la land, and I don't like dealing in la-la land.
Thanks, James. I'll come round and.
Yes, just through experience, you're never going to eliminate deaths on the roads, and that's just a sad fact. It's a good, proposal that Peter Harry-Boss has got, but like Gary said, to have a goal, it has to be achievable, and if you set up an unachievable goal, you're failing each year, and I'm afraid that's what you'll do, because it's been discussed this morning about our driver behaviours from Councillor Jeff, that our drivers are quite bad in New Zealand, to put it bluntly, and our roads aren't good enough in New Zealand, and you're going to have accidents, and you're going to have medical issues as well, where people have accidents. There's all sorts of things. It's out of your control, and to have a goal that's to have a zero limit, you're not going to achieve it. I'm sorry.
Okay, Mark, I'll come to you after I've just heard there, but I've got Siggy next.
Great, thank you. I'm supporting Mark actually on Peter Harry Boss because he actually came up with some of the cities that have achieved it. So there are places out there. Yes, we are bad drivers, but let's actually look at improving that. Let's improve. If we don't shoot for the stars, you know, we're never even going to get to the moon. So I think it's a great goal to have, and to then implement some of the other things that we can, hopefully with NZ achieve some of that safety with making drivers safer, not roads, but drivers safer.
Was there anyone else on this side before Mark that wanted to say anything? No, Mark?
No, well, I might have to put a motion, is that right, that to accept it as it is, so this is really clumsy, but with the amendment being that the 10-year target, that in 10 years we aim for 0 deaths and injuries on our roads.
Okay, well, I think if we have the resolution word, something like the Hamilton City Council express its road death target in 10 years' time as 0.
Yep.
And seconded by... To express its target is the word I used. Target as 0. I think that was what Mark was trying to say. Seconded by Councillor Henry. So that's up for debate. I'm going to let Mark speak a bit, then I'll come to the others. I'm just not using that the board that we had before because they were for other questions, some of it. We got a bit mixed up there. So we're just doing this now. That's on the table. Mark, you can speak to it.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, look, while I appreciate, Leo, the great work that has been done, and we have, I think it was a bit rough to say we aren't going far, but we are city leaders, so let's lead this darn thing. As Siggy said, there are cities around the world who are achieving 0 deaths by aiming for 0 deaths. It can be done, and we don't have to toe the line in this one. It can be done. You are guaranteed to miss every shot you don't take, and we are paid to take shots. So I cannot for the life of me see why we are targeting 34 deaths. What, if we don't reach that, have we missed it? If we get less than that, have we missed our target? Let's go, I mean, what's the point in having these unless you're going right for absolute 0 deaths? And yes, it is the price you pay for cars. There is a certain risk, but it also puts the onus on car manufacturers, our road design, and a lot more than just the ratepayers and the car drivers to reach this goal. I really would love to see Hamilton take the lead in this country when it comes to road safety, not just for cycles, for cars, for pedestrians, for everybody. I want this to be the best possible place it can be to move to live in, to work in. So let's aim high with this. It has been done before. What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of? Let's do it.
Sorry, I've got Rob. Did you want to speak on this?
No, I haven't.
Okay, no, it's all right. Thanks. I've got Martin, who does.
I fully support the 0 target, and I take Councillor Tooman's observation that we have made huge gains and we should celebrate that. Go back to 1974 and our road stats. To even talk about those kind of targets back then would have been somewhat laughable. But you know, if Sweden, Norway, the Scandinavian countries, the North European countries can do it, go to a German city where you have an integrated transport system and you actually get best of all worlds, including very, very good road transport. Obviously, in terms of the issue of traffic, a safe, good environment. We are attracting people who are refugees, dare I say, from Auckland. And if we don't achieve the target, at least we tried. At least we tried. And I just want to recognise that Councillor Leo in particular, he's knocked on too many doors in his professional life, too many doors to give the devastating news. And we've got to just join the team and do everything we can possibly do to try and reduce the mayhem and the tragedy that still's there. And obviously, to me, one fatality is too much. Will we achieve it? Possibly not. Let's try.
We've got Paula next.
My next? Oh, I thought it was Rob was, but
no,
never mind.
Rob doesn't. Has got something else he wants to raise on a different part of the report.
Okay, so look, well, every life lost on the road is an absolute tragedy, without doubt. But I can't support that stretch target at this point, because there again, I think we should be consistent with the approach on the Regional Land Transport Plan. We can have some more conversation around what our focuses should be for road safety for certain, because there are some areas which I strongly believe we can do better at. Driver inattention is one of those that there's a lot of thought going around at the moment. But yeah, it's a very honourable stretch target. I just can't support you in it at this time. But I do hope that we focus very strongly on achieving great strides in road safety.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. In my capacity as chairman of the Finance Committee, I'd like to propose that we aim for a target in 10 years of running this city with 0 expenses. I know it's a big stretch. I know it's a big, you know, we're out there in the stars and I don't want to land on the moon. I don't like cheese. And it's a big one, I know, guys, but if we pull together, if we consistently every morning get up, no expenses, no expenses, no expenses, it'll happen. It'll happen. You know, what you can do when you're having a shower and it's all misses up on the mirror, right, no expenses. Honest guys, you've got to deal in reality.
Okay. Don't forget the context I'm going to speak now, so don't forget the context within which this debate's being had, and that's guidance to, amongst other things, it's guidance to your delegate to the Regional Council, it's guidance to the national body NZTA about how they should look at things too. It's also about our own target here. And I actually support an aspirational goal here. I think it makes us work a little bit harder or pay a little bit more attention. I think there's some downsides too, potentially, because it certainly won't be the 0 budget in 10 years' time that Gary's talking about. If you're going to focus on safety, it's going to be a higher budget potentially in some of those areas. And there's issues like, you know, cars are safer now, but the accidents still happen, and we have horrendous costs for serious injuries, but they avoid getting you to 0 deaths, so that, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, you could give with one hand and take away with the other in this, but I still think it's a worthwhile target to have, and it's actually not an unachievable target in Hamilton City. When you think about it, about 5 years ago, Hamilton City had 0 road deaths. I was going to say that might have been an accident. It wasn't an accident. It was fortuitous, a better way of putting it. And our average has been not that high, not so high above that it would be impossible for us to achieve that, I suggest. Certainly to have it as a somewhat realistic aspirational target. And that's where I think we're coming from here, because those people who are pushing it are probably saying we haven't pushed hard enough in this area. Sure, we've done good work and we're miles better than we were quite a few years ago, but there's still some more work we could do. And if you look at some of the, not just cities overseas, but some of the countries overseas, they do better work than we've ever done in New Zealand in this area. And we're probably saying, some of us, that we would like to be in that same space. Now, down for his right of reply. Rob, you didn't want to speak? No. Thanks.
Just very briefly, look, while I appreciate the humour, Gary, this isn't a budget target, this is a life target. And, you know, we've got kids. I would sooner raise kids in a city where we are aiming for 0 deaths on the road. And I think this is special. This is very, very important. I mean, 99% or whatever the goal is, 34 isn't good enough. 0 is good enough. I mean, we shouldn't accept any more than 0. I mean, if you want to accept more than 0, tell Jimmy Spittle, sorry mate, 8-1 down, you might as well write it off now. You know, we all know what happened in the America's Cup last time. Tell the surgeon who missed a cut and said, oh, look, it was close. We expect 100% off those guys. Why can the city not expect 100% aspiration from us? What are we afraid of? What does it affect? Our judgment? Just means we're taking life a little bit more seriously on the roads. It's not we're not going to lose our jobs if we don't reach it, but we're going to try a hell of a lot harder if we're using the right language. I don't think we need to be afraid of this. I really don't.
Okay, the resolution we're debating is D up there, D alone. We're going to come back to the rest afterwards. Sorry, Gary?
Are we talking, is it a separate resolution or is it an amendment to the motion?
A separate one, Gary.
Okay.
Yep. because we've only been debating it, we haven't been discussing any of the other thing. So we'll go to a vote on the board. Paula, where are you going? Mind you, I shouldn't. No, you can leave, Paula. Sorry. See how democratic I am? Okay, vote on the board, thanks. Paula, there. Was two. No.
The motion is carried 6-4, 5 against.
Okay, councillors, so that's separate resolution, it's passed. We won't be coming back to that issue. Rob, you've been waiting patiently to raise other issues to do.
Yeah, I mean, my question now is quite frivolous after the discussion that we've just had. But my question or comment was quite quick, and I just thought on page 89, where we have the photographs and we're talking about delivering a balanced transport system, we could replace one of the two photos down the bottom of that page, perhaps with a commuter train.
Yes.
That was all I was going to ask.
Deputy Mayor has spoken.
Not a modern one, a nice looking one.
Do we have them in New Zealand?
When we find one, when we find one that doesn't run on subsidies, you can put it in there. One that doesn't have to be bailed out.
Everything else, all of these other things run on subsidies.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's carried by acclamation. Any other issues, substantive or otherwise? Gary, did you?
Yeah, just on page 85, the background, paragraph 17, and I assume this has already been direction, is produce our dependence on cars, blah, blah, blah. That to me is very, very biased, I guess.
Sorry, which number? I just missed.
Paragraph 17, page
Thanks.
85.
Yep.
Okay. And I assume this is beyond, can't be changed now, but I would feel much more comfortable with something like to ensure the safest, most efficient and effective transport system possible, utilising both private and public transport modes. Because, I mean, reduce our dependence on cars and minimise single occupancy trips. Then you talk about take responsibility for travel. Well, everybody who drives a car takes great responsibility. They pay for all the costs, you know, they pay for the cost of the car, they pay for the cost of the time in the car, they pay for the maintenance and petrol in the car. To say that someone isn't taking a responsibility or making a decision that they feel safer taking their kids to school rather than having them cycle, or take their kids to school in a car rather than relying on a bus network or something like that, kind of, it's a bit disparaging, I think. I don't know how where those 4 points have come from, and
well, Gary, this is a draft for us to alter if we wish, and we just have altered one part of it. You are at liberty to change that, and it's quite in order to propose a change. Maybe to help you a little bit, I know in previous iterations, I believe we talked about providing travel choice.
Yeah, I can remember those things. Yeah,
expressing that.
That's completely disappeared.
Well, it is. It's inferred in the next bullet point, but not in the top bullet point.
Which one? The second one?
Yeah, in 17.
Second one says the community knows that every trip counts and take responsibility for travel choices. That take responsibility, but it doesn't talk about providing choice.
Yeah, no, I'm taking your point that I think previously we would have said something like ensure that travel choices are provided to people moving around Hamilton or something like that.
So.
I'm just trying to help you here.
Okay, so paragraph 17 hasn't been approved by anyone yet.
That's why it's here.
So,
okay.
So, just to be clear, paragraph 17 has been an Access Hamilton strategy since 2010. So the report is, and it's saying that was the strategic direction, but the report does say it was confirmed that the strategic direction of Access Hamilton is still robust and aligns with national and regional policies. So that was through some of the task force groups that we've had.
Okay, so a bit of advice, Chris, if the numbers were here to change that to something closer to what I said, would that carry no weight? Because it would then have to go back to Access, these people, Access Hamilton, or whoever they are, and get approved by them
Hamilton
also.
City Council.
Pardon?
They're the Hamilton City Council.
Oh, is that us, is it?
Yeah.
So we're shooting ourselves in the foot, are we?
So, Gary, I'd suggest that the thing to focus is on page 97, which are the objectives of the strategy, and we've just had a big discussion about reduce or eliminate. Those are the objectives of the strategy, the new ones that we're promoting. And so the transport choice, if you look at that, it's enable access to essential services, employment and recreation by providing transport choices for all uses.
And then there's a series of targets down the bottom.
To me, that essential services are really important. In fact, they're essential. But we don't, on a day-to-day basis, no, we don't engage with essential services. I assume that's fire engines, cops, and ambulances. I suppose. I don't know.
Well, it's people getting to their schools, to the hospitals.
Okay, well, that doesn't. Essential services does not conjure up in my mind driving my kids to school. I'm going to work, going to play. Yeah, I just think it's. I can see, it just seems to me that, and I understand the mentality behind. I think I understand the mentality behind it, and it's too blatant. It's not even very well hidden this time.
It doesn't. When you look at the targets, current and 10-year targets, and that below, it doesn't remove car travel. It puts some percentage targets on other modes, but the balance remaining is essentially car travel.
Paragraph 17 is very explicit to reduce dependence on cars and minimise single occupancy trips.
Yep.
Now that for a heck of a lot of people is the most efficient way to get around. Yeah. They just simply can't or are not prepared to ride a bike to work because it rains, or they've got to stop and pick up stuff from the supermarket, all sorts of reasons, pick up kids from school. The buses also don't work for them because they aren't on a route, or else they don't have the flexibility to take you to the supermarket on the way home and pick up kids from school.
So Gary, you've sort of made a speech in favour of an amendment, which is fine, but you've got to
and my point was, can we influence this?
You could either change point 17, or you could change something in the diagram on the page that Chris has referred us to, and either one of them could do that job, and Mark chose the latter course of action with the deaths one just before, which was one of the ones on this page.
Okay.
In red, and the bits you're talking about are the green circle and the green rectangle at the bottom, or the statement up front.
Well, I guess because 17, it says that the strategic direction of Access Hamilton is those 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Then I'm being told on page 97 the investment opportunity objectives are those 3 balloons. I'm just confused as to how those three things
arise out of the 4 bullet points under 17, Gary.
Okay, so they're the targets, are they?
Yeah, they lead to targets. Yeah,
now
outcomes.
Changed to 0.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
But the statement that starts the green circle off is the one that you're referring to.
Yeah. Can I just be very clear on page 97 when you're looking at those targets? You'll see they're in a black box to say to be developed, because those targets will very much depend on the program of works that you want to do and how we set those targets. Okay. So if you chose not to invest in safety, you might set a different target. So by setting a 0 target, you've set a high hurdle now in terms of investment in safety that we'll have to consider. And the other one. So there's a bit of iteration that needs to go on between the program that you choose and the targets that we want to select to match the program.
Is it appropriate or proper process for me to ask that something like to ensure that the safest, most efficient and effective transport system possible, utilising both public and private transport modes, replaces the 4 bullet points that are there? Because, I mean, I'm sure that my thing captures everything. So we're talking about the safest, we're talking about the most efficient, the most effective, utilising public and private modes, but it doesn't give any bias. Whereas, now there may be an intention that there is a bias, and I accept that, that's okay, I disagree with it, but I just think that my personal view is that bias is not acceptable and is inefficient and is probably not as safe as it could be.
Gary, look, you're fully entitled. You have to decide what you want to change.
But I've never tried to change a staff. I think I'm asking to change a staff report, and I don't know the process. Is that what I'm asking to do?
No, this is I believe you're trying to change the direction of
Yeah,
Access
absolutely.
Hamilton.
Yeah, by changing the staff report. Yeah.
No. The staff's merely reporting what's in the Access Hamilton strategy right now.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah, we'd have to do some more work on
Yeah.
what the outcomes would be if we did change it to that. But you can say the direction of travel
outcomes
is
would be
not,
a better,
is not
happier
quite
world.
correct.
Yeah. So look, to help Gary, I think what you're proving today, if you look at the resolution, is really page 997, which is the objectives and problem statements.
Yeah.
And probably 95. You're not actually been asked to formally approve the strategic direction. We've had task force and groups have said that it still forms the strategic direction of Hamilton, but you're not being asked to actually sign up to those bullet points. I imagine that when we get towards the end of this process and we understand the program you want and we're finalising the transport objectives and the front end of the strategy, would come back with the whole thing tied together for you to approve. So it'll probably be at that point in time. So what you should be focusing on, your decision around those investment objectives is the important one now, which then starts helping us with the program that we're developing.
And that's the point, I guess. If we sign up to paragraph 17 as it is, that's quite a different work process, workflow for you guys than it is to sign up for something like what I've suggested. Because that one, I mean, signing up for what it is now is you will, in all honesty and appropriately, you'll be reducing our dependence on cars and trying to minimise single occupancy car trips. You'd have to do that because that's what you've been told by council to do, isn't it?
The outcome that staff are proposing would meet that wording in 17. Don't forget, still includes 70% private car travel, one person, single occupancy private car travel in 10 years' time. At the bottom of page 97, 70%. So it's not like they're proposing that we get a majority of people out of cars. It's still got a majority, and it's got a slightly reduced majority as a result of those statements on page under number 17.
But I'm just resistant to that we should be setting any target.
Yeah.
I mean, let people people make their choices.
Gary, you have to make a decision on what you want to do.
I guess I'm saying I've never been in a situation where I've tried. Okay, because I can't see what this. Okay, what is this thing trying to do? What approves the problems? Okay, what are the problems?
Gary, I would like you to, if you're willing to move if you're willing to move a resolution and get a seconder for it, the effect won't be to change the wording in the report. It will be to send a new direction to the Access Hamilton Task Force, which will then have to consider how they meet that. It's not trying to change the staff report.
My amendment, or it's the recommendation at the moment, because there isn't no recommendation, is there? Okay, is that on page 85. Up the top there says recommendation. Okay, wouldn't be from management anymore. That the Growth and Infrastructure Committee receives the report. Point 2, pursues a work program to ensure the safest, most efficient and effective possible, utilising both public and private transport modes.
Okay. Is there a seconder to that resolution of Gary's, which replaces replaces the recommendation?
Yeah, is there a seconder?
Sorry, Angela?
I was just going to say to Gary, wait for a second before.
Yeah.
No, that was my fault.
Okay. There's no seconder. Not really. We need a seconder. We'll get the word. Gary, would you read it out again?
Okay,
This is to replace all of the recommendation here with a new recommendation, which Gary's proposing.
So on the top of page 85, there's a recommendation from management. That is the current heading. And what I'm suggesting, that the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, A, receives the report, B, pursues a program of work to ensure the safest and most efficient and effective transport system possible, utilising both public and private transport modes, I guess you'd say, within Hamilton.
Okay. That's to propose to replace A, B and C.
No, replace B and C.
Yeah, no, well, it's all, you've got A there as well.
Yeah,
So-
you have, A remain,
Yeah.
we received the report.
Is there a seconder to that?
So just to be clear, Chair, so that's going to replace paragraph 27?
No, it's going to replace, it's going to be a different recommendation. Councillors, it's quite simple. Gary has looked at the recommendations here. He's proposing a different wording, which he thinks believes will lead to potentially to a different outcome, more work to be done on the work programme,
Is your concern that your zero death thing will get, okay, well, that's already been accepted, so I would tackle.
Yeah, that's not going to change that.
Yeah, that doesn't change, that can't change.
And I said that at the start of this discussion. It's to change the recommendation there. I'm not going to have a discussion whether there's no seconder though.
I'll foreshadow an amendment if there is.
Okay, is there a seconder or not? Sorry, yes. Okay, there is a seconder. That's the resolution on the table. I will move the staff recommendation as an amendment. Is there a seconded by Rob? They're both on the table, so it's clear. We've got Gary's as the motion, the staff recommendation is the amendment. All right? Okay. Now, I'd like to move to debate on that. Well, sorry, is that?
We're just tidying that up. I've got yours. Yours is the
Staff.
seconded by Rob, staff.
Yes, yep, thanks. We'll just wait a sec for that to get sorted. And then we'll go to a debate. Gary will speak, floor. Gary will wrap up and we'll debate the amendment and the motion together.
So, can I ask you a question now?
Yep.
So, C on the staff recommendation with Gary's doesn't apply anymore?
Correct, Gary's A and B replaces A, B and C.
So then, when you go over to paragraph 27, because it refers to that, so it's totally setting a new direction for Access Hamilton.
It's asking the Access Hamilton, my interpretation, which I said before, is asking the Access Hamilton task force to set a new direction, yes. We'll have to rework things. Some of the works obviously could be included and some may not be able to be, but that hasn't been looked at yet, the details. Yep.
The motion, Mallet motion, is replacing that strategy that the task force has been working on.
Yep.
Isn't that correct?
It will lead to an amended strategy, no doubt about that.
And it's, oh, sorry.
So I'll give you a chance. So I think you could speak now, Gary, and the wording will come up if you're all right with that.
It is definitely intended to change the focus of the work program. So to move away from trying to reduce dependence on cars and minimising single occupancy trips, to ensuring the safest, most efficient and effective transport system possible, utilising both private and public transport, so there is no bias between private or public. And there is certainly my suggestion does not have a bias against cars, which I believe the existing one does.
Okay, thanks. Take other speakers on the motion.
So it addresses safety, addresses efficiency and effectiveness.
Yeah, Gary's resolution and the amendment are both on the table. We're discussing them both together. Andrew. Oh, sorry, I've got Angela and then Andrew. Sorry.
I'm not going to support the Mallet-Henry motion. I think we set up a task force for a reason. We had a briefing the other day. These issues didn't come to the fore at the briefing. It's still really early in the journey. Respect the right of any elected member to raise any issue at this time, but designing a strategy that governs the biggest and most fundamental core service that we do by committee is not the way that I thought we were going to approach things in this term. I probably by the end of this won't agree with everything that Access Hamilton sets out to do, but we had a very good strategy last time, and I'm expecting that the task force will deliver a very good strategy this time. I'm not round the table, and I just think that that's just a really poor way to approach governance. You should just vote against it and not try to redesign something off the hoof when we haven't. The task force hasn't finished their work. Give them a go, I think. So I'll be supporting the McPherson-Pascoe amendment.
Thanks. Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, Gary may well be right, but I can't support it with just such a quick direction during a meeting. Very similar to what Angela's saying. We're going through a process and we may come out with the outcome Gary's looking for, but I think it needs to go through the process. So I'm not saying whether you're right or wrong, Gary. I'm just saying the process isn't correct. It's moving far too quickly, and none of us around the table knew this was coming. And I just think it's something that needs to work through the task force in the first instance. And I'd strongly encourage you to attend the task force to bring forward these thoughts through the task force, which then will come back to council. And at that stage, then would be the time to bring through this type of thing. Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. I'll be quite brief. I actually think if Gary and Siggy's motion was to go ahead, we'd probably end up in the same place anyway. And that a lot of experts have worked out that our reliance on cars alone has created congestion and safety issues and inefficiencies for the economy. I don't see the work that Access Hamilton's doing as restrictive and threatening to people in cars. In fact, it's probably going to identify that our public services are not up to scratch, our cycleways are not up to scratch, our alternatives are not up to scratch, in which case we may need to provide better services. And I think they're doing some fantastic work in that space already. So, yeah, I'll be supporting Dave and Rob's amendment in this case.
Thanks, Rob.
I'll be supporting the amendment. I think that the current work plan, as it's progressing, needs to identify and work around existing behaviours and to try and influence and change behaviours moving forward. So I think where we're sitting currently at the moment in terms of behaviours and the work of this task force is exactly where the amendment's going, and it may well, as has already been alluded to, land somewhere where Gary is currently suggesting.
Thanks. I'm just going to briefly speak and say I suspect Mark might be right that we'll end up in a somewhat similar place, but I do think that there's nothing wrong with the process that Gary's followed, and it's not as if he hasn't raised these issues before in this council as well as previous ones, so there's nothing new in that, and I think, to be honest, councillors are prepared for that sort of issue to debate. But I disagree with him I think the direction of travel of Access Hamilton as it currently stands is right. It's always from the start called for a balanced approach, not kicking out one mode of travel at the expense of the other, but to make sure that all are available as much as possible and to improve the ones that aren't very available at the moment, which almost by definition, certainly by evidence, has been almost everything bar car travel. It's about the only thing that's almost universally available. So it's to try and add some choice to the mix that we already have and to ensure that there's the correct balance between them. And when you see that the proposal at the moment, the way it's being looked at, is only to change the single occupancy car travel from 80% reliance at the moment in 10 years' time to 70%, that's an extremely modest change. So I don't think that car drivers need fear, or people that think that's the main mode need fear Access Hamilton. I think they should welcome us getting 10% of the vehicles off the road and of the travellers off the road and into alternative modes of transport, to be honest. That's my pitch. But Gary, you've got the right of reply now.
Thank you. Listening to a lot of the opposite views to what I was suggesting. just to be quite clear, the process, you can bring up a motion, amendment to an motion whenever you want to, as long as you've got a seconder. Secondly, to ensure the safest, most effective and efficient transport system, utilising both private and public, doesn't shut down any amount of work or any stream of work that is underway now. Thirdly, 10, 15 years ago, this council embarked on through some Agenda 21 or some sort of weird greeny thing, decided they'd get rid of cars. Well, we've absolutely destroyed our CBD. We're in the process now of trying to rebuild it, picking it up out of the ashes. I don't know if we're going to get there, but that was as a complete and utter reason, because that was completely because of the anti-car vision that went on around this council 10, 15 years ago. We're trying to pick something up out of the ashes of that. I don't know if it can be done. And I can't think of anything more open-ended and non-threatening or non-biased than the motion I've got up there, to ensure the most efficient, safest and effective transport system, utilising both public and private transport modes. I mean, I don't know what scares you about that. To say that we're going to that is the same as, people have said we'll probably end up in the same place as Gary thinks we will anyway, with the existing one, which is to reduce our dependence on cars. Now that's very, very blatant, and that's very clear what the Signal Council is giving to the task force, and to minimise single occupancy car trips. That's very, very clear and blatant to what we're going to ask the group to do. To ensure the community knows that every trip counts. Now, I don't know what the community's got to do with the individual. I mean, every time I jump in my car, am I supposed to ring the neighbours and say, "Hey, I'm going in my car, do you mind?" Am I supposed to put an ad on the paper saying, "Tomorrow morning, Gary Mallett will be taking his kids to school, going to the supermarket, then coming into his office. Do you mind if I do that?" Is that what we're saying, that the community knows that every trip counts and takes responsibility for my travel sources? It's just, I think, I don't quite know what you're all thinking, but I think you will be embarrassed by the end of this, because you've drifted away from reality, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. We move to voting on the board. Thanks. We're voting for the amendment. Or against it, which is the resolution up there from myself and Rob. For or against that, if it passes, it becomes the resolution. Okay, councillors, get with the program. Rob's and mine is the amendment, so we have to vote on that.
So we're voting on the amendment first?
Yep.
As we always do?
Yep, that's right.
As is normal? Yes.
So you understand, everyone? Thanks. Voting for, if you agree with Rob's and my motion, amendment, you're voting on for that. If you disagree with that, you're voting against it. Okay, cool. For or against, thanks. Yep, it'd be quicker. It'd be quicker than explaining the bloody thing.
The amendment is carried, 9 for, 2 against.
Okay, so all right, now that becomes the motion. The amendment is carried, so we're voting on the show of hands for.
Can you just explain how it works again, Dave?
No.
If we want to vote for it, do we vote against it?
Of the motion, which raise their hands. Those against, 2 against, Siggy and Gary. Thanks. Okay, councillors, I need to move a resolution now that the time be extended. I'm going to move that it be extended to 5:10 p.m. Seconded by Andrew. Those in favour, against, carried. So we've got half an hour to finish the last 3 items. Next one is item 12, Hamilton Auckland Passenger Rail Transport, including Park and Ride. That's on page 99. Report is read. I'm going to take brief questions, and then we're going to, and just to start things off, I'm going to move the management recommendation. I'll move that, and that's seconded by Siggy. That's on the table. Questions, please, councillors. Sorry, I'll just... Martin? What's my amendment?
I've noted the Chair's report and with reference to the future proofing of the opportunities at the base. Mr. General Manager, I see.
Just keep going, Martin.
Okay, look. The only focus I have around this report today is just to actually get an update as to what steps we must take if we are serious around future-proofing some opportunities around the base for a park and ride rail platform.
That's right.
And I'm getting obviously some mixed signals.
Martin, have you? Yeah, okay. Sorry, Councillor, I need to have an apology made. I'd worked out with the General Manager a changed motion last night. I thought that's what I was moving.
Okay, if we can see what that is.
If that's been given.
That may help me.
Do you mind if I take that, Chair?
Oh, hasn't it?
No, it should be ready.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, I'm hoping
Sorry,
that might
it was
help.
ready. It was just a mix-up. I went too fast there.
Sorry.
Sorry, Martin. Just wait a sec. We'll put it up. No, Gary, we don't need your help this time. That cost us half an hour last time.
I mean, your motion may answer my question.
Have we got that on the board?
I'm sorry, no, we're typing it up, we didn't receive it, sorry, Chair. But can I
Okay.
also just clarify that given it was moved and seconded to be safe,
No.
having a process, can we just agree that we're withdrawing?
Okay, could we, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because that's a whole extra paragraph to type up, I'll move on to the next item. Before I do that though, I'll seek the permission of the meeting to remove that resolution and to move on to the next item. So I'll move that we remove the resolution from the table, move on to the next item, seconded by Councillor Gallagher. Those in favour? Against? Carried. It's 2-4, none against, so we're right. Sorry, I went too fast, sorry. Can we, while we're typing that up, can we go to the Hamilton Ring Road, Cobden Drive connection update, page 121?
He's got an alternative motion that's supposed to have been recirculated. He's going to come back while it's being typed up.
We've had a briefing on this just to remind councillors that it's just confirming the discussions at the briefings. Happy to answer any questions.
The plan is on page 127, councillors, which is the same plan that we've seen before in the briefing?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's the plan with Cobden Drive going over the top of Wairere Drive.
That's correct, and bristling with walking and cycling facilities. Yeah.
But still with cars, Gary.
Bristling with cars as well.
Okay, so questions, councillors. I've got Rob, Angela and Martin. Is that right? Oh, previous one. Strike them off, please. Stick up your hand. Who wants to speak? Question first. Gary. Moved by Gary, seconded by Leo. Martin, you've got a question?
All you'll confirm, Mr. General Manager, this report essentially states, I think, what we already know, and we're, in essence, by voting for the recommendation from manager on page 122, is affirming a direction of travel that's already been set. Have I got that right, or am I being a little too simplistic?
More or less correct, yes.
It's affirming our direction of travel that we're...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Mark.
On the timing, so we're expecting that overpass, underpass, roundabouty pass thing there to go in. How long between that and, all things going well, the bridge across to Peacocks?
It's not the bridge across Peacocks.
Yeah.
It's the bridge across Wairere Drive.
No, but it will end up further down the next one. How long between that happening and this bridge there?
Yeah, understand the question. I can't give you that answer. It will depend on the decisions you make in the long-term plan and clearly the outcome of the Housing Infrastructure Fund. Clearly we have some desires and views of how quick that would go, but I can't give you that
What's
answer.
the quickest it could be done? Maybe if turn it that way round, realistically.
Andrew?
For the bridge across.
This one and then the second part.
And then the second part across to a connection into Peacocks Road.
Yep.
For 5 years if you started today.
Right.
Maybe 4 years if things went well.
Okay.
But of that order, it's a major undertaking to get across the river.
Yeah, it's massive. So what's the timeline on this one alone?
We're looking at 1 or 2 maybe summer seasons. Ideally, we'd like to keep it to 1, but ultimately we'll be taking it to the market, and the market will give us the best price with the best program.
Yep.
But at this stage, I think we'll be working on a couple of seasons. Is that right? Yeah.
So you're saying
2 summers.
this could be driven on in a couple of years, basically?
We'll be coming back to council once we've finished the design. We'll be coming to council, for the construction funding decision.
Yep.
But at this stage, we're working to go to tender for construction right after Christmas, and then after that, it will have market pricing. We have market programs, and we'll be able to tell you what that means.
Great.
So autumn 2019, a few months before the election.
We'll see what we can do.
Not at my mind.
Andrew, sorry mate, had you finished?
Yes,
Mark?
thank you.
Andrew, and then Siggy. Andrew?
With iwi?
For this one here, there's been ongoing discussions for quite a number of years, right through the designation phase, but there's still a number of discussions to be had with iwi, in this site and in the broader area, particularly in relation to some of the land matters. So yes, there's been some discussions, but there's more discussions required.
And the bridge over the river is how far advanced are you with discussions with iwi?
Not. Actually, I was going to say not very, but that's not quite right. Yeah. There's a iwi work stream set up as part of the designation conditions, and we've had a number of meetings with the 5 hapu, and the conversations with them have been through Waikato Tainui, the tribal representative. So in terms of the giving effect to the designation conditions, there's been some very good engagement, and we have a cultural assessment from them, which sets out the things they want to have regard to. So quite advanced in that sense, in terms of working with the family, or families in the area. But there's still a need for more discussions going forward.
And Batman's not going to hold us up?
Probably.
Well, possibly. We're doing everything we can in relation to bats.
No, but we're not. Hey, look, let's stop talking about the one across the river, because this isn't that one. Yeah, thanks. We could be here all dark and hear bats and Gary's belfry starting over there. Siggy, you had a question.
Yeah, just the margins, the monetary margins are quite high. Sort of quite big. Is that just so there's no overrun? Hopefully, we will minimise the risk of overrunning the cost.
You mean the 9 to 14 million in the resolution? Yeah. Andrew or Tal?
Well, look, the unknown is the land, so we don't own all of the land, and so it's really difficult to place a value on the land in this particular area. So, and also at the point we are, so we have a concept design, but we want to shift that to some detailed design drawings, and we're looking to finalise our construction estimate as we go forward. So, I'm comfortable with the band we're working with is appropriate just for the state the project's in at the moment. Obviously, we'll be doing everything in our power, to come in under, but ultimately the market will price this project, and we'll present that result to you in due course.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Look, councillors, we won't get finished if we keep going with questions. Sorry. Yeah, I thought it's been moved. Sorry, if it hasn't been moved by Andrew. Okay. All right. No one speaking to it? No. We'll put that to the hand vote. Those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Thanks. So let's do the other 2 short ones, then come back to the train. 14, page 133, refuse transfer station.
So once again, councillors, take the report as read.
Moved, seconded by James. Moved by Andrew, seconded by James. Questions of Maori. Siggy.
Just one quick one. Because it states here that the last change to the gate fees occurred in July 16. How much did it go up then? Do you know by how much?
There were various percent increases
But
depending
was
on...
it 20% or 30
No, no,
lower?
No, it was
Under
definitely
10?
under 10%, yes.
Under 10,
From
okay.
recollection, yeah.
Okay. No, thank you. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Question, and that's around page 140, where there are comparisons with other councils. Do we get stats of how many bags get dropped every year, how many small trailers, how many cars go through the transfer station?
That data is available if we want it. So
Okay,
we use it for some of our forecasting and planning towards service change, etc.
It just seemed to me in that table, it was a pity that there wasn't the car comparison there, given that each time I go to the transfer station, which isn't that often, it's generally mainly cars that are there.
Yeah, in that table, what we've done is we've compared it against other transfer stations,
Yes.
and they didn't categorise cars,
Oh,
and so
okay.
we've just
So you had a
compared like with
limitation
like.
in terms of the stats, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I guess they include them as equivalent to some other category, small trailer or something. Yeah. Okay, if there's no other questions, sorry, Gary.
Do you have any...
Page.
Just on prices, I guess, just a overall comment. Have you found there's a price at which people will start fly dumping? You know, you get, so for example, $16.30 will give you a car, and a car, I guess, is a boot full of rubbish, isn't it? And at what stage do people, have you any idea at what stage people start chucking stuff down riverbanks rather than taking it to the transfer station?
What we've found, or what we've read, is that that illegal dumping is not directly linked to the price at the transfer station. So it is a behavioural thing. So people, regardless of how much it costs, it's actually they're wanting to basically drive across town to a transfer station that they don't like. They'll go and drive somewhere else, but it's not a cost-driven thing from what we can tell. So over the last few years, there's been no significant increase in legal dumping. It's relatively stable, although we do have a large focus on that at the moment. But it hasn't increased as a result of any increase at the RTS.
Okay.
Briefly to add to that, Gary, we had a meeting about this in the waste minimisation group, and the lady who was taking the course had done a study in South Auckland. She actually found quite the reverse. She found that the more the cheaper the rubbish solutions were for people, the more the fly tipping was. It's bizarre, eh? Yeah. So if it was more expensive, there was a lot less fly dumping, which is bizarre but true.
I don't think we can get much further with the economics of this situation. Yeah, councillors, is there, whoops, there's a date, Chris or Murray, when this all finishes and we can redo the whole thing?
Yeah, it's part of our waste change we're making now. So there's an opportunity coming up with councillors to reset how you want to manage the refuse transfer station and the organic station. So this fee increase proposal will probably go for another year or two, just where we're working out the existing contract.
Okay. We've got a mover and seconder for the recommendations on page 134. No one else wished to speak. Good. Those in favour raise their hands. Against? That's carried unanimously. Thanks. So we go on to item 15, Trade Waste and Wastewater Bylaw Amendment. Is that you, Maury, too?
It's actually Bridget here, who's the author. So Bridget Morgan's our asset manager for City Waters. So she'll be answering any questions that you might have. So we'll just take the report as read. So
any questions on that, councillors? All right, I'll move the recommendation, seconded by Rob. A question, Andrew?
Come on, you did a question.
Bridget's waiting for a question. She hasn't had one. Go on, Andrew. She hasn't had a chance to answer one before. Sorry, Bridget. We tried. Okay, those in favour, raise your hands, please. Against, that's carried unanimously. Sorry. Okay, we're back to 12, and I'm going to recut, that's on page 99, with a new recommendation, which I'm going to put on the table, and I think that was seconded by last time. Siggy. And if, oh, whoop. Okay.
That C was probably, wasn't there, it was the same one, yeah.
Whoops, we got something in the way.
So C was the original.
Just have a read of that, if you would, councillors.
Can I just ask first, Dave, what does C mean? The black C.
It should be D.
D,
D, yeah.
What does it actually mean?
So what we were asked to do was to just report. There was two parts to the report. One was a position to take into the regional council for the service, and the second part of the report was to report to council about the future-proofing options for rail stations in Hamilton. So from page 103, paragraph 48 is the second part of the report, where we've looked at the options, and probably the more substantive one is about Te Rapa in page 60.
Paragraph 60.
Paragraph 60, sorry.
So C refers to everything from 48 onwards, pretty much. D, sorry, not C, my bad.
Train stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Passenger rail stops is listed here, yeah.
Passenger rail stops, yeah.
Yep.
The infrastructure, yeah.
Now, the reason that B was put in there, if I just say that, was in order to ensure that we do some advocacy up in Auckland and elsewhere around the need for passenger rail service, and not just do a technical business case. Item C refers to, paragraph C refers to agreeing that a business case should be done by the region, which we would participate in. B refers to the advocacy that needs to take place to get a high-level support in places like Auckland for this. And that's the real addition to this.
Yeah. So there is a reference to paragraph 47. So in paragraph 47, it's noting an action that's been agreed in the Waikato plan, and that action is about advocating for the extension of the rail system. So that's just building on that action to actually have a planned advocacy approach for the Waikato to plan their advocacy approach.
Yep. So are there any questions? Councillor Martin.
Look,
oh, sorry.
And I know we're an open session, but I just want to get some steer as to the steps that we have to take to future-proof somewhere in the Te Rapa area. And I know the report alludes to that and talks about that, but obviously the opportunities for some form of passenger platform park and ride will start to diminish. And we've talked, this is a groundhog day in that I wake up every morning.
Just a question, thanks, Martin.
Well, I'm making the point that, it's a question that, the question is, when will we stop, when can we look at some kind of tangible proposal to council, which council can accept or reject?
So the normal place to do that is in a 10-year plan.
Yes.
So in the last 10-year plan, the proposal was put to council, but it didn't make the funding list. So the next time is in this LTP. I think what you're saying is the opportunities are being, the land is building out pretty rapidly in the base. So our advice at the moment is that opportunity might still be there by the time we've finished our 10-year plan, or it might not be. We have I think we've said somewhere in previous reports to council over the last few months, and this one, that the landowner has agreed to have discussions with us before they sell that property. That would be logical to put park and ride in. If you wanted to protect it, though, you'd have to move quickly to really the district plan noted designation as a protection method, but really that equals purchase of the property at this stage. So you'd have to move pretty quickly if you wanted to do that. The report also indicates right at the last paragraph that we're aware that the base hasn't still been fully developed, and there may be opportunities to continue discussions with the base to integrate a facility better with the base, but that's just an opportunity.
Martin, we've got 7 minutes to finish this debate.
Well, I'm just saying, would there be merit in an appropriate pink page report where we actually start talking in terms, but obviously our discussion is restricted. I'm not saying, it just seems to me that we are starting to run out of opportunity. And we may still decide not to pursue opportunity.
Just the question.
Yep, like I could certainly bring back a paper in the public excluded next year about the particular opportunities there with dollars and a bit more information if that's what council wanted me to do.
Do you need a motion for that, or can we leave you to?
No, it's coming up in the LTP discussion. Yeah, for the overall one.
But what I'm, through the chair, if I may ask, I would like that to be earlier rather than later, that's all, that paper.
Or maybe that can come up together, because we're not prepared for it now. I'm not going to have an open discussion over it now. Angela, sorry, I should have gone to you first before.
That's okay, sorry, I'm a little just confused. The strategic business case will inform funding options for LTP though, will it? Is that right? Is that where we're going?
So the strategic business, there's two parts to the rail proposal. One is the service and the operation and how it gets into Auckland, and that's the strategic business case. So it will look at what the problems are and what the options are and opportunities. The second part is if you take the view that the rail service will be provided at some point in time, how do we future-proof for that in the city? And that's what Councillor Gallagher is talking about, is being bold and protecting for the future now, so before we locked out.
It will deliver things that if we want to fund this for the future, because we should have done this 10 years ago, we will be able to do that from the information in that business case.
No, the business case will probably look more at the service and the opportunities.
The question that Martin asked, can we have the information come to us in the pink if necessary about particular opportunity or opportunities for that will do what you're talking about, but preserving the sites within Hamilton.
So that'll be prior to...
Probably a decision made prior to the outcome of the business case, so it would be about purchase of land for future park and ride. It would probably be not a wasted purchase with the productive land out there, but it is a purchase of land.
Page 104.70, what's a kiss and ride? I don't know that I'm too keen on that.
Drop off.
Kiss and...
You kiss yourself on the arm and then hop out of the car.
It is an accepted...
I don't think I'm that adventurous.
It's an accepted term up there with park and ride, so you hear about park and ride and kiss and ride.
If you haven't got anyone to drop you off, Chris will perform the honours. Rob, sorry.
Yeah, just a couple of. I know we've had a long day. Look, I don't know whether this question can be asked, but when I read this report, if there was a Pocono park and ride compared with a Mercer park and ride, does that take away the challenges around the Mary Swamp, which I've understood is one of the challenges to bringing the train down as far south as Mercer?
Yeah, look, I think Councillor Gallagher might be more up to date than me, but I think the last discussion I heard, it was just reported to me second-hand that the opportunities for park and ride in Pocono have gone, so the only opportunity is in Mercer. But yeah, and you are also right that the Whangamarino swamp is one of the big challenges for the line.
Yeah, okay.
At the Waikato plan, Waikato District are proposing a Mercer park and ride. They still anticipate rail stops at Tuakau and Pocono, but the actual quantum size of a park and ride, they're looking at Mercer, and they, of course, unlike us, they own some land at Mercer, and this is seen, if you like, as a significant step towards eventually, from their point of view, carrying right down to Hamilton, but it would pick up people in the area. Okay, I think I've got that right.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one correction. The Mayor's just put me. I think the Whangarino swamp is south of Mercer, not north of Mercer.
Oh, south of Mercer.
There is another swamp area, but it's nothing like the size.
And that's the swamp that actually slows the train down, is it? Yeah, and that's south of Mercer, so Mercer wouldn't create an issue if the park and ride was there. Okay.
And also the railway sidings are already there.
Sorry?
In Mercer, the railway sidings are already there.
Yeah, yep.
And the land's there for parking.
That's right, it is too.
And it's, the other benefit is the road from Tauranga comes
Yes,
in.
yeah, no, I understand that. In fact, Pocono would be even better for the Tauranga people,
Yeah,
wouldn't
there's
it?
no parking left.
Without stating the obvious, what is politically significant for us as a city is our neighbouring local authority, Waikato District, are hot to trot on moving that passenger.
I think it's important that whatever's done, though, is consistent with an eventual service to Hamilton.
Yes.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
From this council's viewpoint, we have to make sure that's heard. Also, I will, as well as this motion, Chris and I will talk about making sure that the paper that Martin's requested comes to an early meeting, that we work out how best to put up the proposition so that we can decide on our local infrastructure needs and costs. There are no known costs that I've been told.
For the strategy, the business case, I think the report indicates it's about $50,000.
Yeah,
per council share.
No, for the total.
For the total
cost.
shared 5 ways.
Yeah.
And that's my...
And no other costs to speak of?
Pardon?
No other costs at this stage?
So clearly the future-proofing, the stop we're talking about is a separate issue. No other costs. The only thing we've brought into it now is the advocacy plan, but that's probably just a elected member input and staff time input.
Yeah.
So that was my second question, which is in paragraph 46. There's the question of costs, and staff were looking in that paragraph for a position from us on the basis that we might have to fund more than an equal share. I just was questioning why we would fund. I mean, it's nickels and dime stuff in terms of the total cost of the plan.
I think it's based on the eventual passenger numbers that might come from Hamilton as opposed to elsewhere.
Okay.
I've certainly heard it expressed in that way. Most of them are going to be yours, so you should pay, sort of thing.
Yeah, okay.
And I think when last time in 2011 we did it, there was more of a push from Hamilton and hence of an input cost, but I think we're getting a really strong push.
So we've already created the precedent that we're more keen than the others, although presumably Waikato must be just as keen now as we are.
It may be that the whole of the cost should be borne by the regional council. They can get it from the passenger transport rates.
And I expect that's what our chair would be pushing without even asking him that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about the disjointed nature of this debate. Well, we've got the resolution, it's up here, moved by myself and Councillor Siggy. If there's no other discussion, I'll put that to the show of hands. Those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously, thanks. Thanks very much. We're sort of right on 10 past.
5 minutes early.
Did I say quarter past? I thought I said 10 past. Never mind. Oh, I did. Okay. We'll see some of you tonight, maybe.